Welcome to Bigger Than the Game with Deremy and Jose. I'm Deremy Dove, and I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Mr.
Ah,
Jose Ruiz. What's going on?
Deremy, what's up, man? It's good to see you, man. It's good to be on here, man. How's everything going?
It's going good, man. It's going good. I
Yeah,
mean, I still can't get over it. This is our first episode together of 2025, and I always like to say we're a national show. We cover all sports of all different teams, different cities, and all that. But we are both from Philly, and
yeah,
love our Philly teams, and we're fresh off of Super Bowl 59, and I'm still in shock that the Eagles are world champs, man.
yeah. It's really nice, man. And I know we were talking earlier, and it's been the norm. This is a great organization, man. And it's like I don't want championships are not the norm, but success with this team is, and it's still uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Like it's a great feeling, and I'm waiting for another shoe to drop somewhere, and like but it's still I'm with you. Like I'm shocked. I'm shocked, but I'm not. Like, you know what I'm saying? We'll get into the team in a little bit, but it's the way they won that. It was just I'm not used to that, so it's just felt uncomfortable for me.
It was just surprising, and it was who they did it against.
Right.
We have to look at that. They did it against the Chiefs, the two-time defending champs. They had won 3 Super Bowls in 5 years. Just had a great have. I'm not saying that the run is over for the Chiefs. We'll get into them too on this episode, but it's just surprising. And us being historians, loving the game, and seeing I'm looking at like Cleveland, right? I'm looking at the Jets fan base. We have friends, that are Bears fans.
Yeah.
I'm looking at what Detroit is turning it around, but how long they did. And you get older and you start to have appreciation because you don't know. Hopefully, whatever your team is, if they have success, you want to keep going. But the fact of the matter is, you don't know. It's not guaranteed. So for this one, it really is embracing the moment and just trying to stay in there and being like, man, it's not about bragging. It's not about saying ha ha to other fan bases. It's about I feel blessed. I feel appreciation for what this organization has done, and I'm taking it in because none of this is guaranteed.
Especially in this sport. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like things turn around so quickly in the NFL, and consistency is something that you rarely see in organizations. And you'll get some. Again, you talked about the Chiefs. We had that New England run, a couple runs with New England Patriots, and you got teams like Baltimore who are pretty consistent in winning. San Francisco, like Green Bay is pretty consistent as well. Like, but for the most part, it's always up and down, up and down, up and down. Like, it's funny when people talk about like the schedule for the next season and predict a win. I'm like, I don't even do that because half these teams that we think are really good are not going to be good, and there's like 3 or 4 teams that we think they're not going to be good or easy wins are going to turn out to be a surprise team and something else like like Washington Commanders this year. Like, they come out of nowhere and they have a really good season. So I'm grateful for that too. I've been thinking a lot about that, and we mentioned earlier, we were talking earlier, like since like 2000, what type of organization the Philadelphia Eagles have been, and again, we don't come on the show, and if you listen to our show, we keep it as real as possible. When it comes to our teams, and if they suck or they're not doing well, we're gonna 100%. We're gonna talk about that. I'm gonna tell y'all, but man, this organization, this team right here this year, man, it was fun to watch. And normally I will say to myself, like, man, like I didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed this season. You know what I mean? Like I really enjoyed this season because I knew, man, like mid-season, I was like, this can be something pretty good. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and the season Saquon Barkley have, and again, we'll dive into all of that stuff, but soaking it in, I was definitely doing that on Sunday. I was just kind of sitting back, and again, it was a blowout, so it allowed me to kind of process it a little slower, and it allowed me to kind of reflect on the entire season, not just that game, and that was pretty cool.
yeah. And for people listening, that's what we're gonna do here. So we're not here to even really get into the game. We're
Right.
here to talk about the legacies and what the outcome of this game will do for both, for the Eagles and the Chiefs. So it's not just an Eagle-centric episode. We're talking about the Chiefs too, because the Chiefs, and like I say, to me, getting to the bowl, this still does add to their dynasty. It's
Yes.
not. I mean, obviously, winning it would have done much greater, but still, it's impressive, and this is still an impressive mark here. All the Super Bowl appearances they've had over these years, what is it,
Yes.
six or
7, I think, straight championship games.
seven straight
It's
championship games, 5 Super Bowl appearances in the past 6 seasons. So this has just been an incredible run here for the Chiefs, and I'm not saying the dynasty for them is technically over. It's
yeah,
not.
it's getting
It it,
there.
it could be some retooling, but we'll get there. But I there's a lot of people we want to look at and what this game did for their legacies, and we're going to mix it up talking Eagles and Chiefs. Jose, for me, there's a few people who are not players who I want to start off with,
Yeah.
and most of them on the Eagles side. There's one who we've talked about many times on this show on the Chiefs
Yes.
side too. But I want to talk about the first person is Nick Sirianni and what this does for his legacy.
Yes.
Because I'll be honest, I've seen this written in the past couple days, and I think it could be true. The only one I'm thinking about is maybe Barry Switzer in '95 when he won. But a coach who going into a year had more pressure and to win a Super Bowl and be under the gun, I can't think of one in recent NFL times who had more pressure to you need to win now or you're done than Nick Sirianni. And we can look at, 2 years ago he went to the bowl in his second year here. But we also look at that awful collapse that happened last
Yeah,
year. A first round, 10-1 that didn't just fall apart and to get destroyed in the first round. The front office pretty much says you have to fire your coordinators and we're going to hire coordinators for you. He was a lame duck coach going into this year.
he was.
And then you can look at it, you get to the bye week, we're 2-2, some ugly wins, honestly. That Falcon loss was a bad loss. And you come out from the bye week, he's got the shaved head. They barely beat the Browns, and he's arguing with the fans. And the local media ripped him. And I will say this, he deserved to get ripped for that too.
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
not taking that back. But the national media got him too. Who would have thought all these months later he'd be a world championship coach?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to unpack with the coach for sure. And I'll be honest, I was in that group or that fan base that didn't even want him back this year. Like I did not. I felt like they got to the Super Bowl, and I think we're going to see this with the Lions too. He lost, both his coordinators, and they both became head coaches, and he was, he hired his own staff, and he brought guys that he thought were going to, younger guys, and Brian Johnson, things like people like that, and younger guys who he felt like were going to be able to step up and become, good coordinators, and that didn't pan out. And it wasn't, they were 10-1, and the Chiefs, it was very similar season to what the Chiefs just went through, a lot of close games and, a lot of last second, wins and things like that. So even as a fan, I felt like they were 10-1, but they weren't really that good. Like it
Right.
was just, it's like, I was like teetering always where it was like, are they just lucky to get some of these wins, or they're just, they know how to win? And you heard a lot that with Kansas City this year. They just know how to win these games at the end and things like that. And I was just watching, especially Kansas City from afar this season, like, I don't know, like this doesn't look nice. You know what I mean? Like, so with last year with the Eagles, they go 10-1, and that collapse was so bad. Like it was just so bad. And it's not like you got a couple guys hurt and quarterback goes down and your best, whoever goes down, and you're losing all these games now. Like no, like there were injuries, don't get me wrong. Hurts was hurt last season, but it was just so bad, man. You know what I mean? Like it was just so bad. You're hiring, bring in Matt Patricia, and then like that was horrible. And this defense was the worst defense in the league, and and Jalen Hurts and him were beefing, and it's just the offense was horrible, and it was just bubble screen after bubble screen. Like it was just so bad that it was so toxic. It looked so toxic, like this organization that everybody felt like you had to make the change. You know what I mean? And what happens? You mentioned it. They fired the coordinators. They bring in some other coordinators, and which was great hires, obviously, and
Made the difference.
100%. And then, but you start this season almost the same way as you were ending last season. It was just barely squeaking by these couple games. The offense looked whatever. The defense didn't look that good. And you mentioned it. That bye week came, and everybody was like, "Oh, that early bye week is horrible. If teams don't make it to the Super Bowl with this early bye week." And that bye week came at a perfect time, and a lot of players kind of went to these coaches and were like, "Look, this is what we want to do." Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson went to them, was like, "Look, we need to run the ball with this guy behind us," and things started to shift there. And then Vic Fangio got in, and we'll get into that. But in terms of Nick Sirianni, like, that's 2 Super Bowls in 3 years, and he's made the playoffs every year he's coached. To me, what I look at him, I feel like he's a master motivator. You know what I mean? Like, he may not be an X's and O's guy. As a matter of fact, I don't think he's a very good one. He can't call plays. Like, he gave up play calling that 2022 season. But these guys play hard for him, man. You know what I mean? Like, and all those yelling and all this stuff like that, they love that stuff, man. And he must be the best motivator in the league because these guys run through walls for him.
Well, I think, we're going to talk about the quarterback, Jalen Hurts, in this
Mm-hmm.
episode later on, too. But I think there's one thing that when I look at those two guys in particular, Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, I think with quarterbacks and with coaches, we judge the rings, we judge the flashy wins, and we also critique them too hard, too. They get too much praise, they get
Right.
too much criticism, they get both. But one thing we do that I've been realizing is with coaches and quarterbacks, we look for the flash too much. So we want the quarterback. You don't just have to win. You got to throw for 400 yards and make all the throws and drop back all the time and do all.
Yeah.
That's how you got to win to be impressive. And now you can throw 400 yards and then you lose, and then we still blast you anyway. So it's a lose-lose. As the coach, you got to be Sean McVay. You got to
Right.
be an X and O's genius on offense, or for a while, Belichick on defense, that genius defensive guru. That's what we want to see. We want to see, it's you. You're the head coach, but it's your fingerprints are on
Right. You can
that
lose
side of the ball. hmm
coordinators, and it's going to keep rolling with no
Even Andy
problem.
Reid, and I love Andy. We'll get to him. But, we see, especially in KC, he's in charge of the offense, and that gives him greater thing. What we don't do is we don't look at, hey, we don't say screw. I don't care who's the most talented per se. It's about who shows up and grinds and gets it done.
Right.
And that's what Nick Sirianni did as a coach. And in a way, that's way more impressive. It is way more impressive. That's why we see there's plenty of coordinators. And I'm hoping nothing but love for Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn from Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Kellen Moore probably go to the Saints.
He went to the Saints today. It's
Right.
official.
So good luck to them. It's not easy to just be a coordinator to go to head coach and have success. There's a lot more to it. A lot of
Yeah.
things that you have to do. Mainly being like that motivator. And you saw there's a lot of talent on this team. And a lot of talent on the teams he had 2 years ago, last year, which is a blessing. You want talent, but it's harder to coach. It's
Yeah.
harder to keep the egos in check. And he's been able to do that. And I think that's what is impressive, and that's what we have to look at. We always want to look at the flash. Oh, he's the one drawing up the plays. No, it's who can motivate and get a team and keep that culture going. That's the most important thing. I don't care if you're X and O's genius. I care
Right.
that you keep the locker room together and these players want to play hard for you and you're accountable for them and they're accountable for you. And we need to give more praise to that than what we do as a fan base, not just for Eagles, but as a fan base in all sports.
No, I agree 100%. And again, I think because as fans, we don't see that. You know what I mean? Like, we don't see the motivational, those conversations he's having with players, those meetings. Like, we're not privy to that stuff, and we see we see Sundays, you know what I'm saying, or Thursdays or whatever. Like we see the game and we see the 40-point games and we see the highlights and we see Ben Johnson throwing screens to offensive tackles. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like we see all of that. And to us, not to me and you, but to fans, like that's what you want to see. You want to see the Madden stuff. You want to see the Madden numbers. And it's that's why I love this team, dude. Like, cause it was old school. You know what I mean? Like it was like when we were growing up, and it was just on based off of dominating offensive line, a amazing running game, great defense, and the quarterback's making plays. If this Eagles team would have been in '92 or something like that, man, like this team would have been looked at so differently because again, like you're not looking at 450 yards passing. You don't look at almost 5,000 yards as a quarterback or 48 touchdowns or whatever it is these guys are putting up now. It's like, you know, this team is it's not about that, and I think also you mentioned like keeping the Eagles in check and all that. That starts with the head coach, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you had players on this team, Saquon Barkley, for example, like was easily could have smashed that rushing record, and I know he was humble enough, and I think he wanted to do it anyway. But like, guys were not about that. Jalen Hurts is like, no, I just want to win, man. Like, I'm not worrying about stats. Y'all can worry about that. And I think that starts with the head coach setting that culture of team, like a team culture, and these guys just buy into it.
No, absolutely. And the same thing you could say for quarterbacks that we don't do enough of, right? Which is no quarterback wins alone. Every quarterback who wins has great talent, great teammates, great talent
Yeah,
around them. You have to look at it. Maybe if you want to go back to Paul Brown days or something, maybe early Lombardi. Every great coach who's won has a great coaching staff. So guess what?
yeah,
You got to have a good coaching staff to win. The head coach can't. There's too much responsibilities. Back in the '70s and '80s, before the game grew this much, they couldn't do all that. And today, you got to have a great coach. Bill Parcells, look at his coaching staff, and we don't take
yeah,
away from Parcells. So I love it when coordinators go, "Oh, is he going to be good?" Yeah, he better have good coaches around him. Like every Andy Reid with Spags and all this stuff. You got to have good coaches around you. So when like you talked about Dan Campbell losing those coordinators, yeah, that's a hit, but it doesn't take away Dan Campbell. He's got to bring in that's an
right.
adjustment. Like you got to have good coaches around you. There's no great coach who's won who I can look at and be like, oh, he doesn't have good coaches around him. They
Yeah,
all do.
none.
Jimmy Johnson had great coaches around him. Bill Walsh, to that Walsh coaching tree. They all have had them around. So I think we don't do a good enough job as fans of being like, yeah, the head coach has such an important role, but he can't be in the meetings. I'm gonna coach tight end meetings, running back meetings,
Yeah,
receiver group, quarterback group, defense as a whole, D line coach, linebackers, secondary, special teams. He can't do all that and do all these press conferences, meet with the
right.
GM. You got to have a good staff. So, yeah, Nick had a great staff. Every coach who's won has. So he's not any different.
Yeah, and I think also like you can look at players like that too. Like, every great player, and we'll dive into the team a little more, but good quarterback needs good players around them too. You know what I mean? To be successful. And I know it's rare. Like you got Brady was throwing a lot of nobodies at one point, in his career. But even that, like most of the great quarterbacks had a lot of great talent around them. So I agree. I think with the head coach, you have to have a strong staff that you can actually lean on. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I love the dynamic now with the Eagles where it's like, you talked about Andy with Spags. Like Spags doesn't get a lot of credit for what the success the Chiefs have had, and he deserves a whole lot of it, because that defense was shutting a lot of these good quarterbacks like Lamar and Joe Burrow and these guys, like they were shutting them down, in the playoffs. And now I think Sirianni has that with Vic Fangio, and it's like he's building this great defense, and it was the youngest defense in the league right now. You know what I mean? Like, and they were the number one defense. Sky's the limit for these guys. If there's like a ton of injuries, they're going to be a top defense next year as well. And so finally he's got some consistency there. Now he's losing another offensive coordinator, but hopefully they'll make another decision on that. And I don't know if he's going to hire, but I think that's also an important job for the head coach is hiring the right guys. Now I know these two specifically coordinators. I don't know how much fingerprints he had on this. I don't think it was a lot, but I think this first time around, he had good coaches here, so he knows what he's doing. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I was very, very, very critical of him. You know what I'm saying? Like, but I feel like he's matured as a head coach. Like he's coming into his own, and these players are buying into it, man. And that's the only thing that matters. Like, if you can get if you can, as a head coach, you can get these players to believe in what you're telling them, you're going to have success. And as you saw this year, that's exactly what happened.
And I'm not going to sit here and say, "Oh, he's going to be a Hall of Famer." I don't know.
Nah.
I'm not here to say that. What I will say is, when we won it in 2017 with Doug Peterson, it was like, man, his second year we got a Super Bowl title. And there was things that happened afterwards that were like, okay, like he left and he went to Jacksonville. He won the division title, but now he's gone. And some people are like, see, Doug wasn't the guy. Doug was the right. You can't take away what happened in 2017.
Right.
And he's a Super Bowl winning head coach. So there's success there. Right now, I don't know what the future holds for Nick Sirianni. He's on a great track record to being,
Yeah.
he's got a great start. Playoffs every year, 2 appearances.
Winning percentage is crazy.
Yeah, in 4 years, and a Super Bowl ring. So he's on a great start, a great foundation for that. But no matter what happens, we can't take away what has happened in these 4 years. We can't take away that he's led a team to 2 Super Bowl appearances. We can't take away the fact that what do we want from people? We want to see, hey, you get knocked down and you get back up, and this guy has done that in the toughest media market, the toughest fan base in the NFL. He's done that multiple times. And guess what? We've seen coaches who are stubborn and don't want to learn. One thing I'll say about this guy, he makes mistakes, but he wants to correct them, and that's huge. So we can't take away these 4 years. No matter what happens in the future, you can't take away what he's done these 4 years, and it's impressive.
Yeah, and I think that Eagles thing, again, it goes back to that. And as a player, if you see the head coach doing that, I think it makes it a lot easier for you to do that as well. And you're exactly right. Like, in 2022, they were struggling a little bit there, and he gave up play calling, and Shane Steichen took over, and they got to a Super Bowl, And if he doesn't leave that next season, they're going to have a lot of success too. Like, yeah, they were 10-1. The offense is going to be much, much better, and with Jonathan Gannon, he was coaching the defense, and they had a really good season in 2022. But even I felt like as a fan, like I was like, man, if they don't get to the quarterback, they're going to be in trouble. Like this defense was totally different this year. But I feel like him giving up play calling and doing all of that speaks to what you're just talking about there. It's just like, man, like this dude, he understands what it takes to win. And it's like I did not see that coming from this guy. You can talk about his first press conference, and he was up there stuttering and he looked nervous as hell, and it was a bad press conference. You know what I mean? Like, but he's grown into that. Like, so it's this dude, like we're watching him mature as a head coach right in front of our eyes, and he's had a lot of success, man. A lot. I think his winning percentage is like over 700. Like, you're talking like, like George Seifert type of numbers. Like it's insane, like with the winning that he's doing. And yes, people always point to look at the teams he's always has. But we've always talked about great coaches on this show, Deremy. And, the one that I always think about in terms of talent is like Phil Jackson. And I'm not comparing Nick Sirianni to Phil Jackson, but like I used to hear him talk about like having to coach great players and how hard that is, to keep them motivated and winning, even though they're great players. It's still, that's a different type of coaching there. And Nick Sirianni is doing a great job with that too, with this team.
Absolutely. And I want to move it over to other people who aren't. I'm going to say there's 2 names, and we're going to talk about them simultaneously. But you got to look at, and now for these 2, I'm talking about Hall of Fame. Jeffrey Lurie, the Eagles owner, and Howie Roseman, the Eagles GM. And I can say, Jeffrey Lurie's owned the team since '94. And I remember for him throughout the '90s into the 2000s, fan base was tough on Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Fan base was tough. He made a comment about, I want to be competitive every year in the playoffs every year. That was in like the 2000s. I remember the fan base went crazy. Competitive in the playoffs. We won the Super Bowl. I know what he means now
Yeah.
when he says that. Like, you got to be in the mix to win it. Howie Roseman's been in the organization since 2000, but really in the GM role 2010, but Andy was still here. He had the final say. And then, 2013, he got it and had, those things with Chip Kelly. Chip pretty much had him demoted. And we look at what Jeffrey Lurie has done. We'll start with him, with the successes he's had. Every coach he's hired been a playoff coach, from Ray Rhodes. Then he goes out and gets Andy Reid. And every coach has been wait, where did he come from? Ray
Yep.
Rhodes was not an obvious pick. Hiring an African-American head coach, which is rare now, but especially in 1995, that was huge. And
Yeah.
Ray Rhodes got Coach of the Year and got the Eagles to the playoffs. Then hiring Andy Reid, who wasn't even a coordinator in 99. And I remember when Andy Reid got hired, and it was like, Andy who? On the
Yeah.
papers.
Folks went to Bill Cowher, and they were screaming, man. I remember that.
And you can check our archives to hear us talk about the Andy Reid stuff. But to Chip Kelly, the college coach, to then Nick Sirianni, he's always done things differently, and I appreciate that about him. He doesn't just get the retread hire. And you can look at it. The Eagles were the winningest team in the 2000s in the NFC. He's had 4 Super Bowl appearances in his time, 2 Super Bowls. We can say how many now? What, 5, 6, 8 championship game appearances?
Oh yeah, yeah. 4 with Andy.
5 with
Doug.
Andy, and
5
then
with Andy. Yeah.
1 with Doug, and
And
then
then
2
2 with
with
this guy. Yeah.
Nick. So 8 championship game appearances. I know the Hall of Fame is tricky with like owners and administrators, but you're looking at it like, how many owners with multiple championships are not, in the Hall of Fame? Like,
Yeah.
and they've had a sustained run of excellence, and what he's done with this, which I don't see, knock on wood, slowing down. So in his time here, do you think Jeffrey Lurie should be in the Hall of Fame?
He's very, very close, like very, very close. And you mentioned all the success, and what I remember when when he bought the team, and he bought the team off of Norman Brayman, was a horrible owner,
Mm-hmm.
and people want to criticize Jeffrey Lurie, and I just remember him. He was this like producer, California dude, and he just had a different. He was just talking different. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was just such a different vibe to compared to a Norman Brayman who let guys like Reggie White walk and things like that, like, because he didn't want to spend the money on talent. And Jeffrey Lurie comes in, and you're right. Like, he's talking about being successful. He wants to be in the playoffs, gets a new stadium, here, and so, like, just all of that, man. Like, and again, you talked about the coaches he's hired, and I was thinking about this too the other day, and because I was thinking about Nick Sirianni, and you're hearing a lot about Nick Sirianni right now, and every coach I felt like he's hired, like you said, has been like a question mark, as for the fan bases. And I remember he was trying to get Jimmy Johnson, like, it was just he's always thinking of making the team better, and what can we do to have success. And I always give him credit for that. Stay signing big free agents. I remember early signing was like Ricky Waters. That was a huge signing. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and bringing him in and changing the culture, and bringing Ray Rhodes in from San Francisco because he wanted to change the culture here in Philly, and Green Bay. I'm sorry, and he wanted to change the culture here, and he wanted success, and that's what he was trying to make happen. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he signing like Urban Fryer. He signs all these guys, and he just wants to continue to be successful here as an organization. Hires Tom Modrak from Pittsburgh, and they start drafting well. They start building well, and that team that they was drafting and building helped Andy Reid become very successful because he still had Dawkins, Trotter, Bobby Taylor. Troy Vincent was another big free agent that they signed before that. So he's always trying to win. You know, Trey Thomas was another guy that was drafted under that regime, I believe. And you know, again, it brings Andy Reid in. Everybody was up in arms about Andy Reid, you know, and nobody knew who he was, but he was very detailed, had a great interview, and they kind of knew that I guess that's what they look at in coaches. Like it just seems like it, like a very detail oriented guy, and you know, that's what I had read somewhere that's what something that like Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie look at, and Andy was definitely that. He came in with the notebook, you know, all that famous story that we always hear, and you know, they hired him, they thought outside the box, and they let Andy do his thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's another thing I give him credit for.
Well, I was going to just jump in and say he also has learned from mistakes because he hired
Yes,
Chip Kelly, which on paper, the Chip Kelly era was not bad. They did win a division title. He had a winning record. But we know how Chip Kelly was, if you really read between the lines, if you can remember, like, and it did
it
not end
ended
well.
really bad. Yeah, yeah,
And one thing, what I see now also, you've constantly heard it this past couple weeks. He said it when he got rid of Chip Kelly. He looks for details, but he looks for emotional intelligence.
yes,
And he saw that with Andy Reid when Andy was here. And then he went with Chip, and he saw how Chip did not have that. And he said, I want someone with emotional intelligence. And his next two hires clearly showed that that's what he looked for. Doug Peterson was not the master tactician either. What
no,
I could say I think in the end it kind of went away. He struggled a little bit, but overall, Doug Peterson had high emotional intelligence. Nick
yes,
Sirianni can be over emotional, but I think you've seen he does have a high emotional intelligence. How he handles Jalen Hurts, how he bounces back and handles AJ Brown and different people on this team, high emotional intelligence, and I think that is key. And I think Jeffrey Lurie also does one thing. I bet you most people, and I think the people if you listen to the show, maybe you know, but there's owners who you know. Jerry Jones, people know him. Robert Kraft. There's like, oh, you can just say it like real quick. For as successful as the Eagles have been since the year 2000, let's say, I bet you the common fan doesn't know Jeffrey Lurie's name.
right,
And that's a testament to him
yeah,
that he does stay out. We know it because we're from here. And we know it because we're very obsessed. So I know different owners, and you do too. But the common fan doesn't know him. And you can maybe argue he's the blueprint for how the team should be ran. Honestly, you can maybe say like that how the Eagles have been in the 21st century is the blueprint for how they should be ran.
yeah.
And
Because
I think that's a testament to him.
yeah, and I give him tons of credit because I remember when he bought the team, he was like, I'm not a football guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to hire football guys and allow them to do their job. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I remember him always saying that. That's why I was surprised when I would read reports like that he was involved in like the draft process, and you know, it was a reason why they took, you know, Rieger over, you know, Jefferson and stuff like that. Like he was involved in that, and I was really surprised by that because I was like, man, like he's always been hands off with that stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, then I was like, I hope he's not like feeling himself and thinks he know now he's a football guy. Like, but I remember him saying that very early on. But you mentioned the Chip Kelly thing. That was a big deal. That was a huge hire. You know what I'm saying? Chip was a hot commodity, man, coming out of college. He had Oregon flying around out there and people wanted Chip Kelly. Like, and that was a big hire and it worked. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it worked for a couple of years and until it didn't work and it crashed and burned, you know, but
Yeah.
he, as an owner, I agree. I think he knows what he's supposed to do. You know what I'm saying? Like he knows he's going to trust his guys. And then when these guys come to him, like, look, we need this big free agent. We need the Ricky Waters. We need the Troy Vincents. We need the Saquon Barkleys. Like, we need these guys here. There's the checkbook is open. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he's bringing those
Yeah.
guys in.
And I'll say this, right? He is, and I've read things even as of recent, but in the past too, he's doing what he needs to do. So because he's not absentee. So he's in the
Right.
draft room. You feel his presence. You know he's there. But he's not overstepping and saying I want credit, but he wants to know what's going on. This is his life. This is his team.
It's his
And I think
team. Yeah.
that's what you need with the owner. You can't be absentee. You can't be, we gotta call him on the phone and you'll see if he
Yeah,
picks up and whatever. He's in the war. I want that. I want you in the war room and you know what's going on. And if there's a tough decision, hey, you can make that decision, but you're letting the football people do their thing. But I have to look at it right because it's so tough. When you see the owners who have gotten into the Hall of Fame,
yeah, it's
I think a
hard.
lot of times they look at like the innovation and all that stuff
Yes,
too. And I don't know, it's really hard to say that because Jeffrey's been quiet. But I think I can look at this. And here's another reason why, not just the wins-loss record and the Super Bowls and the players, the consistent excellence from the team. I'll make this case for Jeffrey Lurie. When we watched this Super Bowl 59, the Chiefs have a great fan base and have had a loyal one for decades,
yeah,
since the
long time.
60s.
Yeah,
But in both of these Super Bowls, 59, 57, the Eagle fan base, in 59, they killed
oh my
the
God,
Chief fan base. And
yeah,
57, to me, it was pretty even.
yeah,
Now, you're a little older than me, but when we go back to when Jeffrey Lurie first bought the team and into the 90s, I didn't feel like the Eagles were one of those franchises that, like, oh man, those fans travel.
that traveled well. Yeah,
They're everywhere. The Steelers had that. The
yes,
Packers have
Cowboys.
always
Yeah,
had that. The Cowboys, I can say is coming back now. Washington, formerly the Redskins, now
49ers
Commanders,
fans travel too.
Niners, Bears fans. Yeah, I knew that fan base. But when I was growing up, I felt like, oh yeah, in our area the Eagles are beloved, but nationwide, is it like that?
Yeah,
I truly believe in the past 25 years, that's grown. Where now they are one of those elite franchises where guess what? I don't care who we're playing. If we're in Brazil playing the Packers, it's not going to be, oh, it's a Green Bay fan
yeah,
base. It's going to be plenty of Eagle fans. Where the Super Bowl can be wherever, you're getting Philly fans coming in droves. And to me, the elite franchises have that. And
yes.
he has really helped to make them that, where they were not that for so long until he got here.
They were not that. I don't remember Eagles, playing road games and, you know, you hear Eagles chants and things like that when I was growing up, like I didn't hear commentators say like, "Oh, these fans travel so well." I don't remember hearing that, and again, I agree. Like nowadays, and I know like SoFi, a lot of fans take that stadium over, but that sounds like home games out there, man. Like, and you mentioned the Super Bowl 59, like this on Sunday, that was predominantly, it just sounded like a home game too, especially those introductions and stuff. Like, and I get it. Maybe it's just like the Chiefs fans are like a little spoiled maybe at this point, and which I would understand, but still, like it's just this fan base travels well, and they've traveled well now for some time. And I agree. I think how he built this Eagles brand, it's on the owner. You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, you need to have success, but he's a part of that success as well. And he's always talked about building the brand, building the brand, building the brand. And I remember when he first came around, I was like, I didn't even know what that meant,
Right.
and he wanted to be compared to those 49ers teams out there with the West Coast and West Coast offenses and stuff. He always talked about that, always talked about those like upper echelon organizations, and he wanted to be looked like that. I think not only has he done that, but the Eagles might be the best run organization in football, like easily.
Yeah,
I think,
I think they
and
are.
yeah, and I think he deserves most of that credit.
I think they are because he's been the constant.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Where I love what the Chiefs are doing right now. If Andy Reid leaves, do you feel as confident in the Hunt fan? I'm not saying that they maybe they will, but I can look at Andy Reid really, and don't get me wrong, the Hunt family's backed them, but I'm like Andy changed that.
Yeah.
Where we've had success with different coaches in place, different people like GMs at times, but it starts with him. And I mean, like, and that's been a success where I can honestly say, even with some of these hires, I'm like, I don't know. I still feel confident,
Right.
and I appreciate that. Jerry Jones financially has had success with the Cowboys post Jimmy Johnson, but those wins, those championships, Am I saying Jerry Jones or saying Jimmy Johnson?
Right. Right.
And what has he done post Jimmy Johnson? He's built a great stadium. The Cowboys brand is great, which is awesome. They're a very popular team. They're worth so
Had a
much.
lot of talent. Yeah, they've had a lot of talent. I give
And
them
they
that.
went through ups and downs. They had some talent, but guess what? They're not winning. They're not getting back there. And if they
No.
were to win, let's say Brian Schottenheimer gets them there. Are you saying it's Jerry, or are you looking at Brian Schottenheimer?
Right. Because I think the blueprint is out. Obviously, he's not winning. You know what I
He's
mean?
not winning.
It's been a long time.
So I just think it's very rare. It's hard to say I can say that in other places in the NFL. So I just think Jeffrey Lurie, if he would have lost on Sunday, still needs to be looked at like that. But I think with a win, with multiple championships, he needs to be looked at by people as a net contributor wing, as a guy potentially for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, because that too, compared to like having one, like when you get that second one, it's another level, man. And I saw this, like, I don't know if it was a meme or it was just like they were just showing organizations with like how many organizations have won a Super Bowl, and you have that one tier where it's just like the one Super Bowl, and you got some great organizations, the Bears, like, you got a lot of organizations in there, but you get that second one, man, and that just puts you, boom, at a different, they're like one behind. I'm trying to think. I don't know if it's
The
the
Raiders have
Redskins. Yeah,
3,
right.
and
There's,
and Washington, yeah.
right. So it's like, man, if you get another one now, you're like halfway there to like these top organizations, and it's just such a big deal, man. That second one, like such a big deal. And like that first in 2017 season, like I felt like, that underdog thing was, they were playing that hard. I have a dog mask t-shirt here, and like, what I'm saying? Like, this is something different, what I'm saying? And I think in my mind, I think that was like the evolution also of this organization. Like we're no more like this underdog. I know Philly
Good
plays
point,
that a
yeah.
lot. I think Philly plays that a lot, and the Rocky stuff and all that. That's not the case anymore. Like this is not a underdog organization. Like this is a top organization, highly respected around the league, and I think talent wise they're that too now at this point. But I've done a lot of comparisons to both these teams, and I just felt like, man, like how this organization has evolved. You can look at the team the same way, and it's just like that was a good team. Don't get me wrong, they won the Super Bowl, so, but man, they just got boom, 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 and it's just better, 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 and it's just they're at where they're at, the best roster in the NFL, and I think the owner has something to do with that. But this next guy we're going to talk about is he's the maestro of all that, man.
Well, he's a guy who's been really maligned.
Yes.
I mean, you can look at from 2010 to the past 15 years, been maligned up and down. And you can really even say when he won his first Super Bowl, and then we saw some of the drafts
Yeah.
after, he still was getting slammed pretty good, right?
And I will say this though, I was a part of that,
Me
and his
too,
drafts were bad. You know what I'm saying? Like I will say that. That was the only knock on him for me, was the draft stuff.
which is a big knock. I
Big
mean,
time.
that's a
Yeah.
big part of your job as a GM is bringing in players, and that's free agency and the trades, but also who you're drafting.
You got to develop these guys, yeah.
So he's turned it around from, getting demoted by Chip Kelly and being outcast. And you got to give Jeffrey Lurie credit. He didn't just get rid of him, he kept him around.
Yeah.
And then when he got rid of Chip, he put him back in. So Jeffrey had a feeling and knew how he was special. But then I got to give this guy credit because he constantly makes these deals. He constantly does right his wrongs. Because we can look at it,
Yes.
we used to be able to say he couldn't draft, but look at this team. Look at the draft picks he has here.
Yeah.
From the
That's done.
quarterback, Jalen Hurts, who I can't even talk about him because of the quarterbacks taken in 2020. The first one to win a Super Bowl is Jalen Hurts. And I can
Yeah.
say
Most playoff wins out of all of them.
I was a big critic of that pick.
Yeah, me too.
To looking at what we got with Cooper DeJean and Cleon Marshall, like the whole secondary, to Jalen Carter, who we can make a run as the best D tackle in the game right now.
Yeah.
Just the moves he's constantly made has just been so impressive to, guys on the O-line looking at big Landon Dickerson and
Just
all
look
those
at most of
things.
those guys on this roster were they're homegrown. You know what I'm saying? Like you mentioned the quarterback, the O-line's got Mailata was drafted, which is an insane thing they did with that. Dickerson, Lane Johnson, all these guys were drafted. Beckton was the only one that wasn't drafted. It was an amazing pickup by him. And, you got Devontae on the outside, like in the defense you mentioned, you got all those Georgia boys, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, Nolan Smith, both the D tackles and, Carter and Jordan Davis. You just all these players, and then the secondary is all draft picks except CJ. Like it's insane, man.
But I'm looking at it, right? Who's GMs that are in the Hall of Fame? Bill Polian's in there. Now
Yeah,
he went to multiple places.
it took him a long time to get in too.
He got 4 Super Bowl appearances because he was fired from Buffalo after the 3rd one in a row. So
Yeah,
he doesn't have all 4 for Buffalo. He had success with Carolina, got to a championship game, and he did win a championship in 06 with the Colts. But he has 1 ring. Ron Wolf got in, and
yep,
Ron Wolf was there helping out with Al Davis in Oakland, went to Tampa. He did win one in 96 with the Packers. But Howie Roseman has more rings than Bill Polian and Ron Wolf. And I can't think of other GMs, like strictly GMs who are in right now. I'm drawing a little bit of a blank.
yeah. That's a slim list for sure.
But I'm looking at what Howie has done with 2 rings, 3 appearances, just the constant moves. I think Ozzie Newsome. I know the rule is you can't go in multiple times. I think Ozzie Newsome should go in as an
Yes,
executive again.
yes,
So he's one I think definitely should be there. But you look at why we said about Ozzie Newsome. It's the 2. Really he's a 2 Super Bowl rings, and the Ravens have had great success in the 2000s.
yeah,
I'm looking at it. If we said about Ozzie Newsome, and rightfully so, why not about Howie Roseman as being an executive, to go into the Hall of Fame? Who I think for these 2 guys, Laurie and Howie Roseman, I'm not saying they have to be first bat. I'm not saying all those things,
right.
but they're Hall of Famers right now to me.
Yeah, me too, me too. And again, I think we're talking about Howie Roseman now, the Eagles GM, and Cap stuff, genius. Like that was the original like strength, I guess. Like, he was the cap genius. The Eagles are never in cap they never have cap issues, and he's a big reason for that. Like he understood the cap at a very early age and a very, in his tenure, I mean, and that's why I think Laurie kept him around a lot. Like, what I'm saying, through that Chip Kelly stuff and all that. You know, master negotiator. I think I'm trying to remember his background, and I can't. It's slipping my mind. I was watching. There was an interview. It was another GM, and he was talking about the Eagles and Howie Roseman, and he was like, he's a master negotiator, and it comes from his background. I can't remember what it was, but he's got that. You mentioned those trades, and you talked about all of that. Like he's he has that in his bag. That's another check. You know what I'm saying? Like, and again, I think the issue was always the draft. And you can look at drafts like, again, taking Jalen Rieger over Justin Jefferson. That's obviously a huge miss. The 2017 running back class, was an all-time great running back class. And he takes Donald Pumphrey in like the 4th round or something. And, and you had so many guys there to be selected. That's the Camaro draft and all these other guys. So, there was definitely some misses, for sure. And I think that's every GM, but when he misses, it's like an entire draft full of misses, and
Mm-hmm.
then when that happens, what do you have to do? Now you got to spend money on free agents and things like that. So that's why with the Eagles, it was always like they could never make that step. It's because he was struggling with the draft. But if you look at, man, like even if you look at his last 3 or 4 drafts, like it's just home run after home run after home run after home run, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's just, they're at where they're at today is because the way he's been drafting, and like again, I was hard on him with these drafts, man, because like, I felt like he was killing the organization. You know what I'm saying? Like, he made the major move to get Wentz. That was a big deal, and that was a great move. And obviously, like you mentioned, you talk about his mistakes. The Wentz thing started not to work out. he, makes a trade. Next thing you know, you get AJ Brown from that trade, DeJean from this trade. Like it's just, man, again, home run after home run after home run. And this dude deserves so much credit.
When we can look at it, I see two things, right? Which you have to give that's impressive is that coach for the Chiefs. He helped to give a blueprint for this Eagle organization. And don't think
Absolutely.
that's
Absolutely.
why I always will love Andy Reid, because he's a big part of the success that this franchise, this city feels. We talk about Jeffrey Lurie feels and Howie Roseman. They learned a lot from Andy Reid. So,
Absolutely.
as much as people want to blast him, and he didn't coach well, in my opinion, in this last Super Bowl. They were clearly
Very,
outcoached.
very familiar coaching strategy this Super
Right,
Bowl
I
compared
agree.
to, yeah.
I agree. He went back to some of those old
Run the ball,
tendencies.
Andy. Run the ball,
Yes.
Andy.
Yes, and it was just surprising because he had kind of
Yeah,
gone away. He changed, but on Sunday he went back to it. But I always will have love for him because he set the blueprint,
absolutely. Yeah, he did.
and he starts with what? He starts with the line of scrimmage,
Yep. It's working for both
offensive line,
organizations right now. You know what I'm
right?
saying? Like,
Exactly, and defensive line, and how he learned that and has continued, where he's going to make the priorities are the O line, the D line, and what the quarterback.
yep.
And you look at even from getting Carson Wentz, trading up that number 2 pick.
From like 13. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, that's a huge jump, dude.
And to make that trade, and now we know how Wentz ended, but in that Super Bowl year, he was the leading MVP candidate before that injury.
Yeah, he doesn't get hurt. This is a different franchise for sure.
But he had Nick Foles here in the past in 2013, brings him back as a backup. And Foles had a Pro Bowl year, but then when St. Louis got hurt, comes back as a backup. But he knew to have a good quarterback room, and we see what that decision did. It led to the first championship. That big contract for Wentz, right? He's seeing some things with Wentz, and definitely seeing the injury pattern. So in 2020, we all were stunned when second round you go after Jalen Hurts, a guy who, okay, he played well that last year at Oklahoma as far as passing the ball, but still we're like, that's Lincoln Riley in that offense. This is the guy who, ran the ball at Alabama. He's a good runner. Nick Saban had to pull him in the championship game for Tua, and we'll get to
Yeah,
that more later. But it's all those things, man. And I was like, of all the quarterbacks, I don't mind taking a quarterback, but you took Jalen Hurts.
yeah,
And boy, were most of us wrong. Look at
yeah,
what, and I think that's why Doug got fired in 2020. They said Carson's not working out. Play Jalen Hurts, and when Jalen got in there, he played better for those few games too.
yeah. That
But
last game was weird. He benched Hurts for Sudfeld, and that was weird.
it was very weird. But he's always constantly made the moves to go after the quarterbacks and to keep that room, even when they're not popular. I'm just looking at it, man. This guy is on that track, and I think right now he should be a Hall of Fame executive, because I could say Ron Wolf and Bill Polian, they went to other places too, I guess, but he's got more rings than them. He's close with them as far as Super Bowl appearances.
Yeah,
I just have to look at it and what Howie Rose, and also when you hear people talk about him, his name is there where it's like, man, don't deal with Howie because he's always just fleecing guys.
yeah,
I just think we got to give so much credit to what he's done, and that's where a legacy is being built. We're gonna look at the players a lot and coaches, but these executives with Lurie and Roseman, they've done a marvelous job, and they should, to me, be in Canton.
yeah. No, it's the players are the most important thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, but what these two guys are doing and how they're setting up this franchise, it's a beautiful thing to watch. And I was going to mention that earlier to Deremy, what you mentioned about, him. You can see like it's exactly the same thing that Andy Reid does, and it just builds the offensive line, builds that defensive line, and works from there. You know what I'm saying? Like, doesn't value the linebacker position. Like, it's the same exact stuff, and it's a good blueprint to follow, because if you're stout up front, you're gonna have a good shot to win some games. You know what I'm saying? Like, and even if you look at what they did, even like last year, the year before that, you got Kelsey, Hall of Fame center, on his last couple of years. Everybody knew he was going to retire soon. They draft, Cam Jurgens, like, you know what I'm saying, was it like the second round or something like that? You bring him in. Now you like as soon as Kelsey's gone, you got the guy. He was playing guard the year before after that, and you got the center to back him. Like it was just like boom, you're just gonna slide him right in. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just they're constantly like thinking ahead, and it's like I wouldn't be surprised this year they draft a tackle to replace Lane Johnson coming soon. You know what I'm saying? Like, and again, the value is up front. And in this Super Bowl and in this season, it paid off big time because they were just dominant up front. Like they couldn't stop the run. You couldn't stop their running game, and they were all in the mix defensively and with the defensive line. So it's an amazing blueprint to follow. And if you can hit on some guys, which they did, Landon Dickinson fell because he was hurt at Alabama that last year. And I remember when they picked him, I was like, man, if his knee's cool, like he's going to be a great player. Boom, all pro player. Like, you talked about Mailata. He was a rugby player. They bring him in just out and, transforms him into the best left
Well,
tackle and one of the best left tackles in the league.
well, let's transition to it then. Let's
Yeah,
get to the guys on the field because you know how I feel. You love the DBs and stuff
I
like that,
do. I do.
and that's great. I'm an O-line. I love the O-lineman, and I think assistant coaches should be in the Hall of Fame, like great
Yeah, yeah,
assistants. And Jeff Stoutland, to me, if they did that, he'd be. I think on the Kansas City side, Spags is a Hall of Fame
absolutely.
assistant coach. I think Jeff Stoutland would be a Hall of Fame assistant coach, the O-line coach for the Eagles. And what he's done over a sustained excellence has been amazing. But I'm going to say this, man. There's some O-lines who get talked about on some great levels, right? And I think
Talk to me, Deremy. Talk to me, man.
if I think about the O-lines who are the elite in people's minds, it's the Raiders of the 70s
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
with
Yeah.
Upshaw and Shell and Jim Otto. You go to the 80s, you have Washington, formerly the Redskins, the Hogs. And then you go to the 90s, you got the Great Wall of Dallas. Those are the elite. There's other great O-lines too, but those are the top, right? I'm just saying, man, this run that the Eagles have had, it's really been like a decade, but we'll keep it to just 2017 to now. Let's go to their
Yeah.
Super Bowl runs, right? They're on a run to be the greatest offensive line in history.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think the numbers prove it, the individual players prove it. They right now are better than this O-line's ahead of the Great Wall of Dallas. And
I
you
agree.
know how we talk about those guys. This is O-line has been better. I really feel like you can make a case that they're right there with the Oakland team and honestly right there with Washington too. Like this could be the greatest offensive line play we've seen this. And like I said, it really goes back even a little bit further. But I'm going to keep it to like the core guys of this Super Bowl run. So
Yeah.
2017 to present. This run that we're on right now with this offensive line play is the greatest in NFL history. And I'm making that declaration.
That's a big one to make, but and again, this isn't no homer stuff. Like, if you look at these guys and not only size, strength, but their agility, like the ability to pull and, hit the second level and get to the secondary and throwing guys out of the way, like in the secondary. It's an amazing thing to watch. And, there was, like a slow motion clip of that throw from Jalen Hurts to Devontae Smith in the Super Bowl. Beautiful video. But the thing that I first noticed was the pocket. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it was a 4-man rush, and there was no one around Jalen Hurts for like 4 yards. It was just an unbelievable, beautiful thing to see, man. And again, like, you see the running backs that, the Eagles have notoriously had like one of the best rushing teams in the league. And look at the backs that they've had back there. You had Miles Sanders who leaves Philly, and nobody hears from Miles Sanders ever again. You had Swift back there last year. Who was a nice player. I like Swift. But he goes to Chicago, does nothing. And again, that's offensive line because he goes to Chicago. They had a terrible offensive line. And then you bring in even the Super Bowl run you're talking about. You got LeGarrette Blount back there, and you know
Jay
it's
Ajayi you bring
Jay
in.
Ajayi. You bring in midway the season, and again they made these guys look like Pro Bowlers, and guys are. And I was watching an interview with Saquon today, and he was like, I think it was in the Saints game. He was talking to Brian Baldinger, and he was like, man, like you know I'm seeing holes that I've never seen before,
Mm-hmm.
and you put a guy like that back there now behind this great offensive line, and you have seasons like Emmitt Smith had, like Terrell Davis had, like, Eric Dickerson had, like OJ Simpson had, like now you're adding talent to match that offensive line, and you saw it was a historical season, the best running back season of all time, and that's due to that offensive line. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because if you look at what Saquon Barkley was doing a couple years prior to, it was nothing close to that, So I just think, man, like if you look at the size, it's one of the biggest offensive lines per average. They're like 6'6", I think the average height, and like
Mm-hmm.
328 or 338 or something. It's just a massive, massive unit, and they just were dominant. Like this season was one of the most dominant seasons I've ever seen from an offensive line, Deremy.
Absolutely. And the reason for me the tough one, the closest would be the Oakland Raider run. And why I'm gonna put them over is because you had Shell and Upshaw were great and they were in their heyday. Jim Otto, great center.
It's getting older, yeah.
Yeah, he was older though when he got with those guys in the 70s. And he stopped in 74. So he wasn't even a part of that 76 Super Bowl team. But that's a great old line. But
Yeah,
I'm looking at it, they have it all. The Great Wall of Dallas, to me, the individual play, they had some great individuals, but didn't shine. They were as much as like how they were as a unit. I think for Washington, they had some great individual players with Russ Grimm's in the Hall of Fame. I think Joe Jacoby should be in the Hall of
should be in the
Fame,
Hall of Fame, yeah.
but there was more how to play as a unit. This Eagle team has it both, where they
Yeah,
have the great individual talent and how they are as a unit is impressive. And you look at it, the number of people on this O-line who right now are Hall of Famers
yeah,
in this run. I'm talking about Jason Kelsey will be in, Lane Johnson will be in, and people forget Jason Peters,
yeah.
he will be in.
He'll be in.
And how impressive is it, Jose, when people are like, how are you going to replace Jason Kelsey, the future Hall of Fame center? Fair question to ask.
Yeah,
This is the first year you would think like it's going to be a drop off. No. We get a 2,000-yard rusher. The first year you replace the nucleus, the center, not just the literal center, but like the mind. He gets to call everything out. You get a 2,000-yard rusher, and don't get me wrong, Saquon's that kind of talent. But guess what? We all forgot. They've done this before. They replaced a Hall of Fame left tackle,
yeah,
and now the guy who they replaced him with, this rugby player. I mean, a freakish size, but his story needs to be told more and more. That you don't play football. We draft a rugby guy, and guess what? It'd be impressive if he made the team. Just as a team,
yeah,
like he never played
yes,
before. That's impressive. Guess what? He should be a great story if he's a starter. Whoa, you ever played before? You just played rugby, now you're transitioned to the NFL, and you're a starter on an NFL team. If the story just capped right there,
it's a
make a
great
freaking
story.
movie about it.
Yeah,
No. He's a Pro Bowler. Now he's an All-Pro player this year
number one
and a
rated
Super Bowl
tackle.
champion.
He was the number one rated tackle this season.
Like, right now, Jordan Mailata's story, he's not a Hall of Famer. He could be a Hall of Famer. He has a trajectory to be there, maybe. His story right now needs to be Disney needs to start signing up that movie right now.
Yeah,
I need to see a movie by Disney. Where you at, Bob Iger? Make the
yeah,
freaking movie here because it just keeps topping itself. Like, how do you have it playing left tackle? Don't get me wrong, all those positions are hard, but he's playing arguably the hardest position on the O line
yeah.
at
One
left
of the
tackle
most important one.
and doing it. You know, it's just crazy. Mekhi Becton, they called him a bust with the Jets.
Yeah, top 15 pick.
Pro Bowl level
Horrible.
guard.
Yeah, should have been an All Pro. I think he didn't get All Pro because they were giving up too many on this team.
Mm-hmm.
So it
And
was insane season.
and you look at it, you have to throw in there. Now, with the Raiders in the 70s, even though OJ got it in the 70s, for some of that run, they played 14 games. I get it.
Right.
But to have a 2,000, and no one can take it away because he got 2,000 yards in 16
16.
games.
Yep.
So to add on that you've been the top rated offensive line for a decade, or in that top range really for the past decade, but to now you add on a couple Super Bowl titles, you add on you're doing it with not Hall of Fame quarterbacks. I mean, Jalen Hurts, we can see where his career goes, but not Hall of Fame quarterbacks. And then, like you said, most of the running backs, nah, except for Saquon this year. That's what those great old lines did. It
Mm-hmm.
didn't matter who you put back there; they were dominating and winning. And this is the greatest offensive line in history, man. I'm
Yeah,
making that claim.
it's been an amazing season. Like I have never seen, and we'll get into Saquon, but like these runs, like these 60-yard plus runs, like he had like 7 of them or whatever that number was, and it was just, if you go back and you look at those highlights and you look at it's insane, like those holes he's running through, like, and the time that Jalen Hurts has, he has the most time out of any quarterback in the league, which can hurt him sometimes because I think he holds on to the ball too long, but it's
Mm-hmm.
because he knows he's got all day. I remember, reading stories about Kenny Stabler, how he would just stand there and stop in the pocket. I seen Jalen Hurts do that, you know what I'm saying, like this year, and it's just, again, a testament to that amazing, amazing offensive line, man. Like, you got a right guard who played left tackle, you know what I'm saying? Like, in the league, it was drafted again in the top 15, maybe top 13 in the draft to play left tackle. Now you got him playing right guard, and normally they're not that big, but they just threw him in there and it works. You know what I'm saying? Like, you talked about Mailata. We already talked about, Cam Jurgens and Lane Dickerson, Lander Dickerson, and great players, like all pro players. But to me, Deremy, man, like, it starts and ends, man, with the right tackle. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you mentioned him. You mentioned Lane Johnson earlier, and
Hall of Famer.
Hall of Famer. I think that's a potential first ballot Hall of Famer. I know the PED stuff, we've talked about that before. Like, I don't know if that's going to hurt the first ballot stuff, but I think at this point, folks are already forgotten about that. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Like, it may come up, but I don't know, Deremy, man. Like, they were showing. I was watching a highlight this morning, and Chris Jones, Hall of Fame, defensive lineman for the Kansas City Chiefs potentially, and he rushed on the right side one time against Lane Johnson, and Lane Johnson just punched him right in his face, man. Like, it was just, he just stopped him right in his tracks. It was just unbelievable. So I heard a comparison to Lane Johnson, and I was texting you earlier about this, and I was like, I don't know, but I want to go to the expert, my expert, man. Like, and again, I think it was Brian Baldinger, ex NFL offensive lineman, does a lot of stuff in Philly now, calls games for Fox and things like that. So he compared him to Anthony Munoz.
Mm.
And I was like, whoa, like that's obviously, like, that's top tier tackle. For me, that's if I'm starting a team, that's my starting left tackle. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, and that's high praise, bro. What do you think of that comparison, number one? And if it's not compared to Anthony Munoz, like, where would you rank Lane Johnson in your right tackle
I think
list?
it's hard, and I didn't hear that as interesting. I don't know. I guess the context was he talking about just his career or like how he blocks, his style, like his technique. So I'm not sure what he's comparing. I guess
I think
first,
he was comparing like the athleticism and like just the technique, and
right?
I think Anthony Munoz, if you start a tackle, that's the number one guy. Like,
Yeah.
so
So
to,
I think if you look at the style and technique, yeah, I can see that. Lane doesn't have the accolades that Anthony Munoz
right,
has, but Lane is very unique. Anthony Munoz was an unconventional left tackle when you watch him block. Lane is very unconventional when you watch him block, and he's not a mauler. And Anthony Munoz
right,
was smooth. Lane is as big as he is, and he can, like you said, he punched Chris Lane. Anthony Munoz has that,
yeah,
but Anthony Munoz isn't. Or Lane, they're not like when you watch Eric Williams for the
yeah,
Cowboys. Which I love watching his highlights. He's
yes,
mauling you. Larry Allen did guard and tackle, mauling you. Like these guys are they're smoother with it. Joe
Hmm.
Thomas was smoother with it too. They're not going to maul you. They don't have to maul you. I got to
Right.
block you.
The technique is so there that they're in front of you the entire time. The
And
footwork is there. Like, it's
and it's
amazing.
very unconventional. It's like the way Anthony Munoz would line, the way Lane lines up. I don't know if I would teach that to like up and coming left or right tackles who are younger. I would teach other things that they have, the athleticism, what they do. Like you can teach some, but they do unconventional things that make it so. If you talk about that, I can see it. But what I'll say for Lane Johnson is it's really hard to compare him because he's a new breed, and I
Yeah.
think that's
It's a
what's
freak, dude. Yeah.
he's freaky athletic. But remember, for so long in the NFL, the left tackle was where you put your best pass protector. The right tackle, you're going to put your best run blocker,
Hmm.
and the right tackle is not going to be as strong in pass protection, you know. But he's good for the run blocking. And then we saw in the 2010s, but definitely, going that way. But later on in the 2010s and now, where the D lines have changed, and you'll have four linemen, all who can rush the passer.
Right. It was
Instead
always
of having,
that right defensive end was the man. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and
hmm
you needed that left tackle.
but now everybody's got to block because you'll have four guys who can just rush. So the right tackle has changed where when we drafted Lane, I said we, but, Eagle fans,
Yeah.
it was like, oh, he's a tackle, so stick him at right because Jason Peters is there. But when Peters is going to retire, which probably will be in the year 2045,
45. Yeah.
when he retires, do you switch Lane over? That changed because the NFL changed, where it's like you got to have just as equally a strong right tackle to pass block as your left tackle now. So it's really hard because there's not as many right tackles in the Hall of Fame. I know Jackie Slater's in there,
Yep.
but there's a couple others. I think with Ron, Yeri in there. There's a couple other guys, but he's making right tackle popular.
Yeah.
So he's like an OG original. So in that regard, also maybe you can compare Anthony Munoz and him because he's making a run at greatest right tackle of all time.
Yeah. And like Anthony Munoz made that offensive line, that tackle position popular. He's doing the same thing, man. And it's just he's having an amazing career. He's had an outstanding career. That's the one best thing Chip Kelly did probably was bring in drafting Lane Johnson, you know?
By far his best move.
Yeah.
Not even
So
close.
it's 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 an amazing offensive line, man. And again, I think we're very spoiled here because you mentioned it. It's been this dominant for the last 10 years. Even at 2017, you talked about Peters and Lane Johnson and Kelsey and, Brooks at right guard. Like, it was just a solid, great running game, running and pass blocking offensive line. So it's just been so consistent. And again, we talked about coaching and all that. Like, Stoutland is Jeff Stoutland is one of the best offensive line coaches of all time. And you talked about Hall of Fame. I agree with that. It's just, man, like, you have that type of offensive line, and the crazy part, and we all know this. If you're listening to this podcast, you know how this all works, man. And we saw it again. We mentioned like that Great Wall with Dallas and all that. It's like that first half, man. Like teams kind of stuck around with the Eagles for a little bit, and they were, by halftime they may be down or maybe just up by like 4 or 5 points. Come third or fourth quarter, game is over, man. Like Saquon was averaging like 7 yards a carry in the second half. Like it was an insane number, because that constant weighing on you and pushing you around. The Eagles were just one of the most dominant fourth quarter teams in the league. And it was because of this offensive line, you know what I'm saying? Like, and what they were doing the entire game. And kudos to the coaching staff because they understood that because they didn't understand that those first four games, but they shifted after that bye week. Why? Because the offensive line went to the coaches and were like, look, we need to change this up. We just need to be a run offense. And that's exactly what they did. And it turned the entire season around and it won them the Super Bowl. I think all the credit goes to that offensive line.
It starts first and foremost with the O line. That's as what I will remember for 2017, and also what I'll remember for this year. Like the
Yeah, me
offensive
too.
line is the greatest, and you got to look at it right. I think of the standards of O line coaches. It's really the late Howard Mudd,
Howard Mudd, another one,
and
yeah.
Dante Scarnecchia, who was a long time with the Patriots. And
Joe Bugle, another one.
Joe Bugle's
Great.
a great one. And I think because I'm leaving people off not to bore the listeners, we're talking about just potential Hall of Fame guys. But if you look at the amount of Pro Bowlers, Pro Bowl players he's
Yeah.
had, it's insane. And guys who won't be Hall of Famers but went to Pro Bowls under him. And I'm just saying, he's making a run at the greatest O-line coach, Jeff Stoutland.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought Scarnecchia probably is the guy I would go with because of what
Yeah.
he did in New England for so long.
Yeah. He was great.
But Stout is making a clear case to I think closer than what I thought even to make a run at greatest offensive line coach of all time. So it's just insane, what you have with this team. And one thing that Sunday reaffirmed that I wasn't sure about was everyone looks at the quarterback play in the NFL, and a lot of the powerhouse quarterbacks, majority of them are in the AFC.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, well, the Eagles in the NFC, that's why they got there. They keep it to quarterbacks, which is dumb. Just there. Jalen's not on Burrow or Mahomes or Allen level or, Lamar level. So the Eagles were in the AFC. What would happen? If the Eagles were in the AFC, Jose, they would have kicked ass and
Yeah.
they still be world champions. So
Yeah.
I don't
They're
want to
like
hear no more about, well, the NFC is easy because we saw what happened during the year when they went to Baltimore and stomped them out.
they're
We
4-0,
s-
5-0 against the AFC this year.
yeah,
22 and 1 in like the last 3-4 seasons. It's crazy numbers.
and we saw what happened to the AFC champions in the Super Bowl. So you put the Eagles in the AFC, that dominance still would have been there.
Yeah.
Give
It
me
didn't even matter.
Josh Allen in Buffalo. We kicked their ass. Give me
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. We already did in regular season. I think Baltimore is the second best squad as far as talent assembled
Yes.
in the league. Maybe it'd be a closer game. I don't know if we just dominate them like that, but we would have won that game too.
Yeah. We beat them at Baltimore, and people talk about the Bengals and that offense, and I know they went like 8-8 or 8-9 or whatever it was.
9-8, yeah.
But that offense put up insane numbers. Eagles went to Cincinnati and shut them down. I think Chase had like 30 yards receiving or something like that. And
Which was the game for me, by the way. You talked about feeling good, when
yes,
the year started. When they went into Cincinnati, who is a talented team, but the defense not good, but the talented, and they're still in
offense,
the hunt, and they played a complete game.
yes.
That's when I'm like, this team's got something. That win was huge for me.
For me, that solidified the defense for me. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know about this defense. They're playing. It was like they were playing a lot of subpar quarterbacks, and I was like, all right, we're going to Cincinnati. They're lighting everyone up. Let's see what they got. And they shut them right down. And I was like, okay, like this defense is now legit. So I also, yeah, I mean, I would like to. I don't know if you have anything else on the O line, but we can definitely look at this defense too. And so I don't know. You have anything else on the O line, Deremy?
No, I think we hit the O line. You go ahead. Who do you want to dwell on the
No,
defense?
I wanted to start up front again, and because I'm going to get to the DBs for sure, but I think
No,
that defensive line I wanted to kind of touch on, and again me and you were texting, and you're talking about the youngest defense in the NFL collectively, and this is what a veteran like Darius Slay, I think Slay's like 35 or something like that, so that's with him in the lineup, and the youngest defense in the league. Man, like this is the best defense in the league, obviously, and it started up front again. And you mentioned the name earlier. You talked about Jalen Carter. I wanted to ask you, and you kind of already started it off. You calling him potentially the best defensive tackle in the league. Like, man, this dude is scary, scary talented, man. The stuff that he does up front, and I just kind of wanted you to kind of dive into that a little bit more for me. But Jalen Carter, man, amazing, amazing player.
he showed a lot. And he showed a great upgrade from his rookie year, where you saw some flashes, but I was like, can he be consistent? To then this second year, where it's like, man, he's doing work early in the year. I'm like, he's dominating out here.
Yeah, he doesn't
To
get off the
then where
field either, man.
it's
Like, it's
like
crazy.
everyone kind of saw like he's the best D tackle in football right now, and um, we did an episode on Jerome. He reminds me of Jerome Brown,
Very much. Yeah.
a lot, and not just his playing style, but just also like the personality. He's kind of wild. You got to control him a little bit. He can be kind of wild, but some of that wildness is good. I mean, we had one test this playoff, and it was a big one. That Ram, and I was worried. That was the game I was worried about, the divisional,
Yeah.
and he literally won that game for us.
Yeah.
Like, it's not crazy to say the defense, but Jalen Carter won that game, and without his exceptional clutch play, we would not have been in the championship game. Because when the Rams had that drop, I was worried. I'm like, this might be
No.
it.
Yeah, Brandon Graham mentioned it earlier too. He was on, one of the sports radio shows here in Philly, and he said it. He was like, the kid won us that game because the DB slipped. I don't know if it was Slay. He slips, and the guy is wide open in the end zone, and Stafford was going to just hit that wide open wide receiver. Jalen Carter comes in and gets the sack, knocks him way back, and then the next play, he's in there again, and he forces an overthrow. It's, man, with his size, quickness off the ball, like his hands, the way he works with his hands out there, it's such an amazing, amazing thing to watch. And he's making guys like Zach Martin look bad. He's making Creed Humphrey look bad. Like, all these guys that you're like, oh shit, like he's going up against this dude, man, this is going to be a tough match. Nope, it doesn't matter. Like, he's going to have 4 or 5 highlights of that season, in that game against these great players, man. It's an amazing thing to watch. And I don't understand. I mean, I do understand why he dropped in the draft, but man, like, that's a home run selection there for the Eagles for sure.
No, absolutely. He's someone to be on the lookout for, and what he's going to do in his career. I wanted to bring up, before we look at like the Chiefs, there's still
Yes.
a couple guys, and I wanted to talk. I guess start with Saquon, right? And let's get to it. Is this the greatest season for a running back?
Easily, I think. I can't say easily, but I
Because
say
we have some,
yes.
Terrell Davis in '98.
Yeah.
He had a 2,000-yard season. He had a similar thing where, if you remember the '98 Broncos, a lot of times Shanahan would say, "You want to keep playing," and he would sit out a lot of.
Yeah.
I think the math something was like he set out like 8 quarters or something like
Yeah.
that.
I'm second. They were blowing everybody out.
Yeah, where it's like, who knows where he got 2,000 yards. So I think people forget Terrell Davis had that, and he would go on to lead the Broncos to their second consecutive Super Bowl that year. So this isn't the first time we've seen a 2,000-yard rusher
No.
win a Super Bowl. I do think about some of the years that Emmett had. Emmett in '93, where the Cowboys are 0-2, and then he comes back, winds up, he only got like 1,400 yards, but
That's
then
all.
that's true, only 1,400, but talk about a great playoff run, and not that, Saquon had to have a great Super Bowl to win. Emmett had a great playoff run, Emmett Super Bowl MVP. So I throw those out there because look at the totality. Saquon's up there, but there are some other strong candidates. But why do you say confidently this is the best season we've seen for a running back?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at, he ran for over 2,500 yards collectively, playoffs, regular season. He beat Terrell Davis for that record. The reason why I say that, Deremy, is because, one, if there's no tush push, you know what I'm saying? He's got 20 touchdowns easily. You know what I'm saying? Like, easily. Like, how many runs that, he had, he, was at the 2-yard line or tackled at the 1-yard line, and everybody
Yeah.
knew what was about to happen, So he finished with 13 touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, but that could have been, again, easily. Hurts finished with 14 rushing touchdowns, I believe, and I would say 12 of them were probably from the 1-yard line. So I think if you allow Saquon, and he's going to get those touchdowns, if you allow Saquon to get those touchdowns, he's closer to 20 touchdowns than 13, so maybe more, So I think that would have made his stats look even crazier, which they already were. But
Yeah.
I think that was a big part of it for me too. But just the home run ability, man. Like Chris Johnson had this for me. Like it was just like every time he touched the ball, I was like, man, like this dude, he
Yeah.
can go.
Mm.
But and I love the position, Deremy, man. And like I was like, man, like this combination of size, speed, agility, like I have to watch Saquon play, man, and just to watch him day in and out, like here behind that offensive line, and just all those home runs that he was hitting, dude. Like I've never seen anything like that, man. Like I know I've watched Barry Sanders play, the great Thurman Thomas play, Emmitt Smith. I just these guys, those what Barry did, but Emmett and Thurman, I don't. They didn't have the home run ability that this dude has, man, and it was just an amazing thing to see, man. It was just week after week a highlight that I've never seen before, man. And I don't know, to me again, and then what he did in the playoffs, he ran for like 800 yards in the playoffs, like in 10 touchdowns. And that's with the Super Bowl that they shut him down pretty much, like. But he still had 90 yards, like all to purpose. Like it's just, man, this was an amazing, amazing season. And I'll say this, I did not take that season for granted. I was like, man, this dude is having an all-time great season.
No, I wanted him to break the record. I
So did
really
I.
did.
I did too, man. And
I understood why he sat, and so I was like, I can't blast it because if he would have gotten hurt in that last game, we would have been blasting Nick Sirianni. So I go,
yeah,
we can't go all the way, half in, half out, like, because no one, if he got hurt that last week, no one would have been like, well, we wanted the record. We would have been like, why the hell did you play him? So
right.
it was smart, and they had a bigger goal in mind. But I think you're right, though. All the points you made, I totally agree. I think for the totality, this is the greatest running back season I've seen, and seeing what he did, and Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is a Hall of Famer right now.
Yes.
Saquon this year set him up good. He needs a couple more years, and then I think
Yeah.
he'll be there too.
Yeah.
But he's a couple more. But Derrick Henry, if he said I'm done right now, he's in the Hall of Fame. And I'm hoping that the year that we've seen number one Saquon have, but then number two Derrick Henry, we're going to start to see the running back position make a comeback.
Oh, I think that absolutely happened here. Like Joe Mixon was another. He had another good season. Aaron Jones was another player. It was one more. Oh, Josh Jacobs had
I was
another.
say Josh Jacobs he
Had
balled
a
out.
had a great season. Had a great playoff game against the Eagles. I think I, and that's for me and like another part of this too. Like, and I'm glad you brought that up. Is just like that running back position was so devalued, man. Like the teams were obviously, we all know, like teams were not trying to pay these guys, and that's why all these guys were free agents, and him signing that deal, but having the season that he had, and again, those other guys added to this, but let's just say they don't have that season. Let's just say they have regular subpar seasons, whatever. I think this season, I think just shifted. It's going to shift a lot of mindsets. Now, there's going to be younger GMs or whatever that still are going to be very analytical and use the analytics and do all that. But I think the season he had changed perspective on signing running backs and maybe possibly drafting running backs too.
Yeah, it's interesting during Super Bowl week on Radio Row. Cam Newton has his like YouTube show, Fourth and One with Cam Newton, and he had Terrell Davis on. And if anyone hadn't seen it, I suggest go watching it because it was good, like a half-hour conversation. But they talked about it, and Terrell Davis had great points to Cam, and Cam was doing a good job as interviewing him, just having that counterpoint. I don't think I think he kind of agreed, but he was doing that devil's advocate,
Right.
and he was like, "But Cam brought up like, well, you give a guy all this money, but then you bring in a guy much later round, so why spend the money?" And Terrell Davis said, "What about quarterbacks? Tom Brady got picked in what round? Do we go, oh, quarterbacks, we can get a guy later round, so why don't we wait?" Every position, you have
Yeah.
that where you get someone later for cheaper, but you don't devalue that position. I look at O-line, D-line, DBs. You see that all the time. Tony Romo was undrafted.
Yeah.
Do we say, oh, well, you got an undrafted guy, so we should be paying quarterbacks that much? It's like, we don't do that. And I think he made that point. Like, we're asking running backs nowadays to do more and we're paying them less. Where there were guys back then, and Charles Davis said it, he did not catch the ball at the backfield.
No, he did not.
He just ran the ball. And that was the thing. There was a lot in the 90s, like growing up, I saw, a lot of people just ran the ball. Not There are a lot of them who didn't even block too.
Not
That's why
Thurman
I loved
Thomas.
Emmett did block. And he could catch, and he did all of it. Walter Payton was someone who do all of it. But now as a running back, you're expected to be a receiver, a fullback, a blocking back, and a running back. And I do believe it doesn't matter that Saquon's Super Bowl numbers weren't that great. It will be lasting for a long time. I mean, at least a decade on. That clip of John Mara for the Giants saying, "I'd hate to see Saquon going to the Eagles."
Yeah, I
That
won't
would
be able
make
to
me.
sleep.
And boy, I hope John Mara can't sleep at all, because
Yeah,
your division rival, 90 miles away maybe, has a Super Bowl ring with the guy who by far and away was your most popular player.
yeah. I don't know if it was vice versa. Oh my God, I'd be sick, dude. Like, like
Oh man,
it'd be hard for me to watch that.
you know what the equivalent would be? I'm not saying Saquon is this guy. Like, no one will ever be this guy. Imagine if Reggie White, when he was a free agent in '93, if he signed with Washington or
Yeah,
Dallas or the Giants and gets a ring there. We'd
and
be
has a
talking
great
about,
has 20 sacks in
yeah,
one season. Like
right.
it's
But 30 years later, it'd be talked about, and I'm hoping 30 years later this move is talked about. Like, even if the Giants have success after that, we let Saquon go to the Eagles, and he won a Super Bowl that first year and ran for 2,000 yards.
and had one of the most electric seasons ever. Like dude, I can watch those highlights like with ease. Like that Jacksonville game where he jumped over dude backwards. Like
Right, right.
that that's going to stand the test of time. You know what I'm saying? Like that's going to be a highlight that we're never ever going to not see any again. And the way when they were interviewing him before the game, he was so locked in, man. And it's just, I'm happy for the guy. Like he seems like a genuinely good guy. You know what I'm saying?
He
Like, and
does.
and it was just, man, like he put in all this work. He had a great college career, had a great career with the Giants, and it tailed off towards the end with some injuries and stuff. And then he signs here, and people were like, "Oh man, they got Saquon. Like, how's that going to work? He's kind of done. He's on the tail end of his career already." And that he shut all that stuff down, man. And again, had in my opinion, the best season a running back has ever had in the NFL. Now, if he doesn't win a Super Bowl, then I'm giving that to TD. But he won the Super Bowl. I got to give it to him.
Well, I also got to look at it like this, right? Uh, what he's done. Let's look at what he did to the Giants. With who has his quarterbacks really been?
Right?
He had Eli at the end, and then Daniel Jones, really, for the most part. Like, we'll go right; those are consistent.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
How impressive is it? And this should be talked about in his legacy. In 2022, that New York Giants team that made the playoffs, that won a playoff game, that beat the
Yeah,
Vikings on the road, has to be one of the worst playoff teams I've ever seen.
yeah.
And they had nothing. There was no great weapons. There was not a great offensive line.
No,
Daniel Jones couldn't throw. And Saquon, the defense played hard. Saquon led that team to the playoffs, which to this day, I don't know how they got there.
yeah. I don't know either.
And then they won a playoff game to match. The fact that they got there blew me away. People won't talk about it. That needs to go into his legacy, that he led one of the worst playoff teams I've ever seen into it and with a playoff win.
Yeah. No, he's been a part of some amazing turn. Even Penn State, like when he came to Penn State had a stretch there. They were terrible. They weren't ranked for a long time, and again, that's local, so we're definitely in that. We could see that, and he came along and he put them on the map, and he had all these amazing plays, and he put Penn State back on the map, and Penn State, you can see where
He
they're at
turned them
now.
around.
Yeah, absolutely, and
He was the star player, the star guy that turned that around.
yeah, so you look at it, and then he comes here and just shifts the entire culture. 'Cause we already talked about Deremy, where from that 10-1 start to how that they shit the bed after that. He came in here and it just he completely shifted the culture here with the Eagles with his leadership because he was a great leader this season and his selflessness and the one thing I would never forget with this season, right, when it comes to Saquon is obviously that play against Jacksonville, but how the Eagles are stacked, dude. Like this is the best roster in the NFL, and they have a handful of great players. How these dudes look at him like he's completely like a different level. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that to me was like, wow, like, because you could see highlights of that Jacksonville play when he jumped over the dude backwards, and the reaction on the sidelines of these great
Went crazy.
players.
Yeah.
And it's like they're seeing something on another level that they can't even fathom. And it's like, man, like I got the opportunity to watch 16 games of that and plus 4 playoff games or whatever it was. Like, is man, I would never forget the season for that. Like, to me, it's funny because somebody on Twitter, one of these Eagles fan pages, asked like, what would you like in 2017? The Eagles, what we remember that team is like the underdog, like the dog mask and all that, like Nick Foles, the backup quarterback. Like that's kind of what we remember that team. Like, what would you remember this 2024 season? And I was just like, man, like the sheer dominance up front, right? Like I felt like, and this was my answer. It was like watching Friday Night Lights and how like when Carter High School came out and how everybody was like, holy shit, like look at these. It felt like that. Like I felt like every week people were like, oh my god, like here they come, like the Monstars, and I feel like what Saquon did and how these dudes just looked at him like he was Superman. To me, I would never forget that.
You know what's funny is you're right. I'm going to think about Saquon and the O line. Saquon getting 2,000. That'd be my first thoughts on this 2024 team. But it's funny because I think with those other great O lines, like you mentioned the Carter High comparison, the other O lines had like a menacing, and all these guys on this O
Yes.
line are very like nice.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's like they don't get that because like there's not like the Dallas O line was like they were menacing.
Nasty.
Even
Landon Dickerson is
Washington,
nasty. The Dickerson is nasty.
and he's
He's
probably the
crazy.
only one kind of.
Right.
But
Right.
even like when he talks to the media, when he's goofy, he's kind of funny and
Yeah.
goofy. Like now they play nasty on the field, but they're all like Mailata can sing and
Yeah.
he's
They're nice guys. Yeah.
there's very Lane's a funny goofball where like Larry Allen looked mean on and off the field. Eric Williams looked scary on and off the field. Gene Upshaw and Art Shell and looked mean. Like
Yeah.
I
Them
think that's
hogs were nasty looking
right.
dudes. Like,
You know, so I think that's kind of where it's like a little bit different. But I'm like, you're right. Like they play like the Carter High, but they're all smiley and nice. So
yeah.
that you're just like they don't get the reputation. But I think you're right, man. I do, so our listeners know we're not just all Eagles. I do want to shift a little bit
Yeah. Yeah.
to the Chiefs here, and this was a bad loss. Like
Yeah. On a lot of levels, man.
on a lot of levels, it was bad. But I look at it differently than what I feel a lot of people are looking at it now.
Okay.
I look at this is still it's not the notch obviously that a three-peat would have been for your legacy if you're Mahomes, Reed, Kelsey, Chris, whoever. But I look at it, what that Super Bowl showed, this team shouldn't have been there.
Oh no. No.
And guess what? It was the same way last year. And I honestly feel maybe the first win against San Fran, and even that was close because that San Fran team was very talented.
Yes.
But in all these Super Bowls, the Chiefs are playing more talented teams. I think the Eagles were a more talented team than them in Super Bowl 57.
Overall, yes.
Yeah. I think they were overall a more talented team. I think the only spot that I'm like, oh yeah, they definitely have us in is quarterback and tight end in 57.
Yeah.
And last year, the Niners were a way more talented
Yes.
team
Yes.
than the Chiefs. And this year, the Eagles, well, going into it, I'm like, we are more talented than them
Oh yeah, by a lot.
outside of quarterback.
Yeah.
That was the only position I felt, oh yeah, they definitely have us in. So to me, Jose, I'm looking at this. It's crazy how this team got back there, the Chiefs. And we know because we've seen it, we heard all year, the teams from the 94 Cowboys to the 05 Patriots to some of the 99ers, it takes a wear and tear on you to keep going deep. So the
Yeah.
fact that you could push through to get back here for another year, and this is the furthest a team ever, closest a team got to three-peating, and it wasn't. You still have a lack of talent on this squad because when I'm watching the Eagles dominate them on Sunday, I'm thinking, well, why didn't Baltimore do this?
Right. Or the Bills,
Or the
like,
Bills, or even Houston as a talented team. What's going on here? How That's incredible that they've been able to mask this for so long to get home field advantage and to get back to this game. So it's not the same, but getting a Super Bowl appearance is a notch in your legacy still.
oh yeah.
And this is still a notch, even though this game was so bad. It's still a notch for Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes' legacy.
Yes. Yes. My fear is this last game is going to put a big stain on it, like, because now you're hearing a lot, and again, like the Chiefs are getting killed right now, in the media and stuff like that, and it's like it's almost what I'm starting to feel with Mahomes. He's starting to get the LeBron treatment, like like, oh, he's made it to five Super Bowls, but he's lost two of them already, and it's like, you know, he still won three Super Bowls. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a huge. And he's what 28 years old or something like that, and 29 maybe, and he's had an amazing career. But I will say those two Super Bowls, and people have been talking about it, and I heard it this morning. He's gotten blown out. You know what I mean? Like in two Super Bowls, and you mentioned other games and the other Super Bowls where they've been kind of close games, and they trailed in every Super Bowl. Even 2022 with the Eagles, they were down 10 at halftime. They came back. It was the largest, deficit I believe in halftime Super Bowl history. But it's like, man, like it was bad. You know what I'm saying? Like it looked bad, and I think they had 12 comeback wins this season. Like it was, but you can see it. Like it was not a good team. You know what I'm saying? But
Mm-hmm.
they just always found the way to win. And I think for me, it's the quarterback because you can't even put Kelsey in that. Like I think Kelsey had a
No.
very bad year. Reports that he was out of shape and stuff like that because he was living vida loca, whatever. And he but I think it's a testament for me with the coaching staff. That's a great coaching staff, like a great coaching staff over there. And I think it's a lot of that and the greatness of Patrick Mahomes. Now their offensive line was pretty good. They just got banged up at the end of the year. The Eagles took advantage of that. But man, I don't know how they won 15 games. You know what I'm saying? Like it was a few losses there, a few wins that they should have lost, but that to me doesn't matter. You won those games. You know what I mean? Like, and again, I think I agree. It is a notch on the legacy. Like they got to another Super Bowl. Like that's an amazing thing to do. 7 straight championship games. Like that's big time stuff right there. But this was a bad loss, man. Really bad loss.
Yeah, I mean the last time we had a championship Sunday without Patrick Mahomes, me and you and I just met you.
Yeah,
Like I had
yeah.
just met you. I got hired at that job, and I've been in like a month, and that was the no, actually before that. It's before because I take that back. I met you. I think the year it was that because the first championship game where I met you was the Patriots Chiefs.
Yeah, when the Patriots won.
Right, and Mahomes was the quarterback, and then the Rams Saints for that controversial call. So I take that back. So the whole time I've known you,
Yeah.
Mahomes has been on Championship Sunday. I apologize, I got that wrong. So we got to go back even before, like, which is insane. Like,
Yeah, that is insane. Such a
so
great run.
it's really the last time the Eagles won.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh shit.
Tom
Yeah.
Tom Brady and Blake Bortles,
Yep.
and that's the last time that Mahomes wasn't playing on Championship Sunday. That's an amazing start to a career, man. Like,
Yeah.
now I'll say this one, because KC's O line, they had trouble at tackle anyway. The interior is really good, and it
Right.
has been,
Right. Right.
but they had trouble at tackle, and I look at, like, that's a shame though. Like, you had to move Joe, Tooney, um, to from left guard to left
From guard to
tackle,
tackle. Yeah.
which is hard.
Yeah.
But Houston's got a good defense. Why wasn't that taken advantage of?
Right.
McDermott in Buffalo, they couldn't do it either. So it shows that the Eagles are more talented than them teams for sure, but also those are good teams,
Right. Yeah.
and they were still able to beat them and not get blown. Like, I'm still going to give more credit to this run than knocking it. I feel like a lot of people want to knock
Yeah. You
Mahomes and
can't knock
Reid,
it. Yeah.
but you can't. And now I think what hurts this one is when they lost to Tampa Bay. The two tackles were out. The O line was decimated by injury, and Mahomes still played courageously and stuff.
Yeah.
This one, the O line was getting pushed around, but Mahomes looked bad. He made mistakes.
Yeah. He was rattled. He
Yeah,
was rattled. I think that entire team looked rattled to me. The coaches, defensively, it was just it just was really really bad. But Kelsey, you know what I mean? Like, and to me, I think the difference with this loss and the Tampa loss, it's like, all right, like they're still coming. You know what I'm saying? Like I felt like they're still going to be around. Kelsey looked really old. You know what I mean? Like, and again, like he's a Hall of Fame player, first ballot Hall of Famer.
hmm
He he was shut down. Cooper DeJean shut him down, and Cooper DeJean is a rookie, a young kid, great talent. Played some safety in college, so he has the size and obviously has the speed. To stay with Kelsey, and it was just he looked disinterested. Like it was just it looked bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, so to me, I think when you mention, this thing can continue, I'm like, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, because to me the best player is Mahomes, obviously. That's without question. But I think the most important player is Kelsey and the matchups he created at that position. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're going to take that away. And even though it was away this season for the most part, let's just say, I think they can't get over that hurdle.
Well, I do. Kelsey was one of the most important pieces. I think what happened, which is why it's another notch in their belt, was for those first two appearances in the Super Bowl, you had Tyreek Hill, who he's
Yes.
a
Yes.
game-changing future Hall of Fame receiver himself, right? And letting him go, that's a big move. And they were able to find ways because they had a collection of quick receivers, but they never had the lead dog. And I think that's what's been impressive.
Yeah.
And Kelsey is getting older, and he, like you said, first ballot Hall of Famer. They never got the receiver help.
Nope.
And I always wondered if Kelsey had a receiver, it'd
Yeah.
be opposite. That would open up for him more.
Yeah.
And so part of me is like, Kelsey's getting old. He's definitely on the back end of the career. But if you had, let's say the Chiefs were able to bring Tyreek Hill back, could you see? I'm not saying Kelsey's going to be a 1,000-yard guy. I don't know. But I could see Kelsey having a Pro Bowl type of year, at least
Yeah.
one more,
I
with a
think so.
guy who gets the attention off and makes the
Right.
defense scared. But I look at minus Travis Kelsey, right? A lot of the core guys are still very young, man. Nick Bolton, Chris Jones. So that's why I feel like they can, because it's not like I'm not naming a bunch of guys outside of Kelsey who I'm like, they're old.
Right. there's definitely needs to be some retooling here for sure.
Absolutely.
Like they need to address, and I think what this reminds me a lot about too, Deremy, and we've talked about the connection with Andy Reid with the Eagles and how like Howie Roseman does stuff, and this reminds me of like how the Eagles faded away for Andy. It was just I think it was his stubbornness, like with some positions, and the wide
True.
receiver was
Good
the
point.
wide receiver was one, and he had Tyreek Hill, and then I think towards the end of Andy's tenure here with the Eagles, again he had Deshaun Jackson, Macklin, like he started to bring in those guys, but it's this like his system is going to make these subpar wide receivers play well, and you got the quarterback, and that's fine, but you have in Kansas City you need a wide receiver, like Worthy's nice. The other kid that got hurt, I forget his name, but
Rasheed Rice.
Rashid Rice, he's nice, but they're not game changers. You know what I'm saying? Like Kelsey's getting older. You have nothing in the backfield, and I love Isaiah Pacheco because he's a Puerto Rican dude, but there's nothing back. You can't come back with Pacheco and Kareem Hunt. Like you can't do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, so the defense I think will be okay, especially if Spags comes back again, but because you have a good player, very, very good player at every level. You know what I'm saying? Like, but man, offensively, they need to do some stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like they need to bring in some stuff, and I think if they do, then they have a good shot. But if they continue like just drafting fifth round wide receivers and bringing in a sixth round running back, they're going to be in trouble, man.
Well, I got to ask you this then about the Chiefs because I don't quite know how to get to what happened because that game on Sunday was more than just talent
Yes.
because they've played other teams that were more talented. And let's say, all right, it's still a blowout. My thing is what you said. They looked shell shocked very early on. They were out of it very early on. You can look at the scoreboard and you can't even say that, oh, they fought like champion. No, the
Nah.
Eagles let the dogs off.
It was 34-0 at one point.
Right. So, the Eagles wanted to. Which part of me wants to. I wish they would have because the history books, I think, will see the score and not
Yeah.
realize
And some of the stats too. Like,
mhm, how
yeah,
far away this game was. So that's one thing I'm like, oh man, but like, that's our job to keep that story going.
right.
But what do you think it was to see a two-time defending champ lay down like that and just look defeated? Like Chris Jones's reaction on the sideline, Kelsey did look shell shocked. Mahomes looked disinterested. I'm not saying that they were disinterested, but that was in the first quarter. They looked like,
Yeah.
what's going on? What do you think it was?
I think, and I'm not trying to give them this out at all. They got dominated by the better team. You mentioned this earlier. I think it takes a lot on the team, man, to play that last game year in and year out. Like you see it a lot in hockey when like teams get to the Stanley Cup Finals and they just get there a couple times and then like it's just a complete drop off like one year. Now they had the good regular season, but man, like I don't know if it was that. I don't know if they were just so worn out by the season and all these close games and always fighting to the end and trying to pull games out. Like they just mentally were done. And then as soon as this fucking avalanche came, like they were just like, that's it. Like I have nothing else. I don't know if it was that. Like coaching wise, they got out coached in all levels. Andy got out coached, and we were mentioning earlier, and I kind of alluded to it where this game was a very familiar game plan from when he was here in Philly, and he would just like pass happy with McNabb and forget about the run, and teams were teeing off on that. And they ran for the fewest rushing attempts in Super Bowl history, like with 7 of them, like other than Mahomes' scrambles. But in terms of like a running play, like it was 7 plays, dude. Like you can't do that and expect to win, especially when you've seen your O line struggle so much in pass protection. Like you have to make my whole time in my mind, I'm like at halftime he's going to adjust. They're going to come out running the ball, take a little bit. Nope, it was just let's go, let's keep going. So I think they were out coached. with Vic Fangio, with Andy Reid, and I think Spags was so hell bent on not letting Saquon beat them that, it was just they let it on Jalen and he beat them. You know what I'm saying? Like, and they were playing a lot of one-on-one coverage against those wide receivers. You can't do that either. So I don't know. I'm saying all of this it's hard for me to put my finger on it too, Deremy, where it's just what the hell happened. I just think it was a perfect storm where it was just like this team is like done, and this Philly Avalanche just came and took it over.
One thing I will say, what this loss did for me, Mahomes is still in great trajectory. He's already an all-time great start.
Yeah.
What I saw Sunday, he's going to have a long way to go to be the GOAT to
Yes.
surpass Brady.
It pushed Brady up to me a little bit.
Way more.
Yeah.
Way more. And I think that's just what I felt like. What I saw Sunday, the disinterested look.
Yeah.
The shell shot. Now, it takes a team, and Tom Brady didn't win those games by himself. He didn't make the great comebacks by himself, so I get that. But I wasn't getting the let's go. I wasn't getting the fiery. It was more like he was like, "What's going on?" And I'm thinking, I know it's hard to compare, but I was going back to 28-3.
Yeah.
And what I saw, how Brady looked, and he wasn't the only one, but how they were going, how the coaches looked, and I'm just like, shame on us, because if he would have won Sunday, he's still not the GOAT.
No, but
It would have been a
it's
great stepping stone for it, but
yeah.
what Tom Brady did that was amazing was the longevity, was he had the 10 years of no championships and the 2 heartbreaking Super Bowl losses, and he bounced back
Yeah.
and did another dynasty. We shouldn't be talking about Mahomes being the GOAT right now.
Oh, I don't. You know what I'm saying? Like a
Yeah.
lot of people do though.
And it just showed, though, if I have to say it, I don't think he's going to get there.
Yeah, he's gonna. I don't think so either, because I think this was the opportunity to do not this game, but this run. Andy's leaving soon. You know what I'm saying? Like I give Andy a couple more years and that's it. Again, we talked about Kelsey possibly leaving soon, and I, the window's very, very much closing, and you have other teams who are getting better. You know what I'm saying? Like the Ravens are a good team. Buffalo, they add a couple players, they're going to be right back at it. And then you got to play these Eagles team. Man, good luck, man.
I just think it's what hurts LeBron in the LeBron Michael debate is not LeBron losing, but how he lost
He
to me.
lost. Yes, good point.
And this game was one of those where
Because now
what
he's got
hurt,
two. He's got two of these.
but the other one he showed heart. He was running around.
Yes.
He was hurt. The O line's banged up, and I saw Mahomes was. You and I watched that game together.
Hmm.
He played hard throughout. If Mahomes gave me that on Sunday, I wouldn't be as tough on it. What I saw, I'm not saying he didn't care, didn't try. I never would say that about somebody, but he just looked shell shocked, and I feel like he's their leader, and
Yeah.
him being shell shocked, that passed to the whole team.
Yeah.
And him not rallying, and we've heard him with that Kermit, let's go, let's go. So like
Yeah.
him, we've seen it, we've heard it. He wasn't doing that, and I think Andy Reid looks. I think those leaders, Kelsey, the big three, that passed through the whole team. And that first quarter, I was sitting there going, "This is weird. This feels like they're just overwhelmed."
Yeah.
And it feels like every play that doesn't go their way, they're just like, "Oh my god!" And that's not championship football or
Right.
championship level play. The Eagles showed that bad call against AJ Brown, that 4th down pass. I was like, what a BS call. I loved how that they weren't. That's what gave me the first sign.
Me
It's
too.
like
That next
they were
thing was
still.
3 and out, and I was like, that's good. That's a
Yeah,
good
I'm like
sign.
they. It didn't show them they were ready to go, and the offense came back out. Let's go. We're not phased. That's championship level ball that we saw from the Chiefs
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
the years. I'm like, man, every play that doesn't go their way, they're just like, oh, like the sky's falling. That's what will always stick out with me. Like, what happened?
Yeah, it's hard to put the finger on it, but it was very surprising. And I think you talked about being shocked. I was shocked. I think that's the part that shocked me the most. You know what I'm saying? Like where I knew this team was good. I knew this Eagles team was good. My prediction was 31-20. I was like, man, they're gonna, it's gonna be close. It's gonna be a regular Eagles game. They're gonna be close and they're just gonna pull away at the end. That was my mindset on this. And but 34-0 at one point, 40-6. I was like, yo, like this is insane. And I felt like once that snowball started rolling down the hill, like the Chiefs knew they couldn't stop it. It was just like, just get out of the way. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you're going to get ran over. And I think they felt that. And I just think, like you said, like from coaching to the best players to the worst player, it was just they knew they were done. We're in for it, and we just got to get this hurry up and get this game over with. And it was.
Man, incredible, incredible. So I want to end it on talking about number one,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
MVP, Jalen Hurts, and what this guy's been through since he's really been in the public eye, starting at Alabama. And I'm just impressed more and more by his story.
Mm-hmm.
And I will, watch the Eagles Packers, that first playoff game this year. And early on, I was with my brother and one of his friends. And my brother's friend turned to me and said, "If Jalen Hurts loses this game, you have to consider moving on from him, right?" And I go, "What are you talking about, man?" And it was early on in the game, and the game wasn't decided yet. But I go, "They're not going to lose. But if they do lose, once again, what the hell are you talking about?"
Yeah, yeah,
But what he showed me, and he's a fan who follows it, knows what's going on, is how unreal expectations and how lopsided we have gotten as fans, and I believe even as some people in the league when it comes to quarterbacks. We
yeah,
are just so far gone right now, and I think this win right here and what he did and what he's done his career from college to the pros, I don't know if it'll change anything, but it should in how we look at quarterbacks because we're just so gone. And I'm like, you got to bring it back in. I go, show me the greatest. Tom Brady did not win every year.
yeah,
Joe Montana did not win every year. If we want to switch sports, Michael Jordan did. There's only few guys, but let's throw out a league guy who was close. That's Bill Russell.
yeah.
So what are we doing here? Where now we're looking at it where we got to get rid of this guy. We got to get rid of this guy. I just laugh at it, man. And Jalen Hurts, I'm just so glad he showed those naysayers.
Oh, so am I. And the way they won the game, it was just, if you could have asked me to script it, I probably would have had Saquon going crazy, but I was like, man, like I would love to see Hurts come out, throw for 300 and just, shut everybody the hell up. And he was close to that, you know what I'm saying? Like I think what was it, 221, but added 72 yards rushing, which was the most in Super Bowl history for a quarterback, and 3 touchdowns. It's played a beautiful game. And I was with my older brother, let's just say, and I was like, dude, he's on the money. He's sharp as hell. All these passes that he throw to AJ, that pass interference, it was a beautiful throw. That throw to Devontae Smith, beautiful throw. He was in there hanging in the pocket, and he knew when he was running, he was very selective, but he was taking off. It wasn't no hesitation, and he just played an outstanding game, man. And I was thinking of like, who can I compare this guy to? You know what I'm saying? Like, and not player wise, but I think like all the shit that they have to deal with. And then I was watching a halftime show and I was like, Terry Bradshaw, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like all the stuff that he had to deal with. Now, I think when it's all said and done, Hurts will be a better quarterback. Bradshaw had a cannon arm, like stuff like that. But it was just very similar to me. Like all like, he was apparently like the weakest link on the, the Pittsburgh and things like that, and how great that team was, and they were carrying him despite the quarterback. Like I was like, man, it's like kind of similar stories in the sense where, Hurts is like everybody looks at this roster and it's like, well, the weakest link is the quarterback still, and they put guys like Herbert over him in rankings and things like that, which drive me nuts. But, you know, he's a winner, man. You know what I'm saying? Like he just does all those little things that you need a quarterback to do. Those one big throws, he's going to make it. That one run, he's going to make it. What he doesn't get a lot of credit for that I also wanted to bring up is like all these adjustments at the line of scrimmage. I know now that Kelsey isn't there, he's calling all of that stuff. And all of these big Saquon runs, a lot of them were audibles from Jalen Hurts, man. And he's become such a complete quarterback. Does he have the arm strength that some of these other guys? No. Like that anticipation is going to get better. He's 26 years old, dude. 26 years old. He's made the playoffs every year. It's the second Super Bowl. Outplayed Mahomes in both Super Bowls.
Mm-hmm.
Man, the sky's the limit with this dude, man. Like
And
sky's
once
the limit.
again, throughout his entire college and pro career, he will have another offensive coordinator.
9 out of 10 years, dude.
So now let me ask you this. Joe Montana had some pretty good consistency
Yeah.
with his coaching. Peyton Manning had Tom Moore. Brady had Charlie Weiss. Then he had a lot of, Bill O'Brien, Josh McDaniels, but he had a pretty consistent group. It's hard to find those GOAT kind of, Landry and Staubach. Show me a guy who's had that inconsistency, yet he still wins.
Yeah.
He still wins. And also, where did it come down to? You have to just throw a million times,
Yeah.
and that makes you the greatest quarterback. Like, when we took who was the GOAT before Brady? Joe Montana. He did not have any of those great tools, like
Nah.
the way Elway did or Marino did. Look at Tom Brady. Everyone knows that story. And now Brady did, I think, in the 2010s, develop into like, man, he's that dude. But in the
Yeah.
2000s, he was still that dude, but he was not the gunslinging kind of guy we all see. I mean, I look at Aaron Rodgers, and he's an all-time great. Look at how Green Bay did for him. They had him throw it all the time. One Super Bowl ring, and that's it. And a lot of like misses and a lot of playoff, like, ooh,
A
what
lot of
could have
home
been.
losses. Yeah. Yeah.
And imagine I bet you Aaron Rodgers, if he was honest with himself, wishes that they ran the ball more, took the ball out of his hands. When Peyton finally got over the hump, to me, well, the two biggest things was, number one, Bob Sanders on defense. Number two, he started running the ball even more with Joe Adai and Dominic Rhodes and
And
depending
Elway
more on
too.
that.
Elway didn't win Super Bowls till Terrell Davis came in, and Elway was not the focal point of that offense. It was Terrell Davis.
But it becomes, if you have a running back and you use that, something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
The Baltimore Ravens would have been AFC champions in my mind if they did not drop Lamar back so many times in that Buffalo game.
Yeah. Henry had less than 15 carries, something like that. Like, it was
Remember in the
crazy.
third quarter of that divisional game at Buffalo, that drive where they just pounded the rock, Buffalo couldn't stop that.
Right.
When were the mistakes? When Lamar dropping back, fumble, got a pick. I mean, and they still came back, and Mark Andrews had the drop and all. So kudos to them, but Baltimore would have been in the AFC. I think they would have beat Kansas City. Honestly, I
Yeah.
do. They
And
would have lost to us,
right.
but would have beat Kansas City.
Buffalo beats Kansas City if they continue to run the ball. Like
Right.
they stopped giving it to Cook, and they wanted Josh Allen to play hero ball. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it makes sense to me, man.
But when we don't see it that way, a lot of fans, and we gotta. I said Jalen Hurts in that same count was a top 10 quarterback, and it was and is he better than Dak? I'm like, is he better than Dak?
They had Tua ranked over him, Jared Goff. Like, I'm like, come on, man. Like, y'all crazy.
Detroit, I bet you they wish, hey, they would have at least get in the championship game if Goff with those turnovers.
Yeah.
I just think what we always want to do is call someone the greatest or whatever, or you're not the hero ball, even though, and like in life, everything you need a team. It's not just one person.
Right.
But I'm not going to call Jalen Hurts a Hall of Famer or anything like that, but his story needs to be told. And I think sometimes, Jose, that's just as important as the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
You know, I look at guys like Randall Cunningham, Bo Jackson. I don't think either one of them should be in the Hall of Fame,
No.
but they were game-changing people that, guess what? Just as important as the Hall of Fame, their legacies need to be told. We should never forget Randall, just
Yeah.
like I'm glad we're not forgetting Bo Jackson.
We can't talk about the sport without talking about these guys, you know?
Yeah. Eli Manning did not get in the Hall of Fame. I think he will. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer, but guess what's just as important to me?
Yep.
What he did in those Super Bowl runs and in that game and the toughness he showed. His name should never be forgotten, not just because it's Manning, but because of what he showed. And sometimes that's just as important, man. Like, you don't have to be a Hall of Famer to be like your impact. You changed the game. You made history. And to me, I look at what Jalen Hurts is doing, his story. He had Big A on his face when the greatest college coach ever said, "We can't beat Georgia. We got to go with the freshman backup in Tua."
And then he
That would
win
have
too.
and that would have crushed most people.
Yeah.
He stayed the next year, showed that maturity, was great friends with Tua, didn't let it divide the team, goes to Oklahoma, second in the Heisman. People forget that, but Joe Burrow had the greatest
Yeah.
season,
Ever probably.
for a quarterback. And
Sheesh.
then guess what, man? You look at that 2020 draft. Look at all those guys in there, man. You got Tua, you got Joe Burrow, you got
Herbert.
what? Herbert. Who's the guy? Who's the Super Bowl champion?
Yeah. Most playoff wins. Hurts got 6. I think Burrow has 5.
Mm-hmm.
Them other dudes ain't got shit, you know?
Jordan
Like,
Love's in there. He
yeah.
beat Jordan Love to get here.
Yeah.
Like, I think that story needs to be told that guess what, man? And God bless Tua. He didn't do anything wrong, but who's getting the last laugh now?
Yeah. No,
And I think
he had a good season, man.
that's just what I want people to remember. This story, just like Jordan Mailata, I don't know where his career is going to end, but we tell this story about this is incredible what he's doing. A rugby player to this, Jalen Hurts, that breaks 90% of people.
Yeah.
Even before the NIL stuff and all that, people would have transferred, pouted. He never did that once, just used it as fuel. That's inspiring. And that's the thing that he has. I don't care. Herbert can have the arm strength.
He ain't winning shit.
Mm-mm.
And he's had talent around him. I don't want to hear that. You know what I mean? Like, he's definitely had talent.
So I just think Jalen Hurts needs to be remembered for that. I don't care if God forbid, he retires right now. His story, what this guy's been through, is just incredible, man. I don't think we're talking about it the way it should be talked about. Like, this guy has something in him. I don't ever have a fear about him
Right.
dropping the ball in a big game situation or not being prepared or he's going to hurt us. I'm not saying he's always going to gunsling his way out. I know he's not going to hurt us.
Yeah. No, they don't lose a game if he doesn't get hurt. You know what I'm saying? This year, they beat Washington. They blow up Washington out that second game. I think they won 10 in a row, and he gets hurt the first quarter. Saquon has 100 yards that first quarter. It's because of the threat that Hurts was providing, also running the ball. Washington comes back, beats them. They don't lose that game if Hurts is
Mm-mm.
playing, and
I agree.
that run just continues. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's just, again, the season that they've had, man, like, it's just 18 wins, tied for most ever. You know, like, I think it was the 84 Niners, 85 Bears, '07 Pats. Like, they had such an incredible season, and I'm seeing people talk about, is this one of the greatest teams in the last quarter century? You know what I'm saying? Like, and there's stats to prove it, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and you know, the eye test proved it to me. You know, so I was watching. I got to give credit to Rich Eisen and his show, and they just were They were just throwing stats out. It was insane, man. You know what I'm saying? And obviously, for the Super Bowl, for the playoffs, they score 145 points. That's the most ever. They surpassed the '94 49ers. You know how we feel about that team right there, man. And 18 scoring drives in this game. Eight scoring drives in this game, the most in Super Bowl history. Man, there's so many of these that you could just go on and go on. Like only team with the leading rusher, number one defense, leading tackler, other than the 92 Cowboys. And yes, the best Cowboys team out of that run that we've talked about plenty of times. So there's so many numbers here, so many stats that you can look at with this team and see how great they are. But it all starts with what position, and it's the quarterback. You know what I'm saying? And he sets the tone with that leadership ability that he has, and how he's very matter of fact and always about winning, and it ain't about stats with him. And I think that trickles down, and we talked about it with Saquon, we talked about it with Nick Sirianni. It's all about team. And you hear this all the time with every team, but when it starts with the quarterback, man, dudes follow that. And he's a guy that they all follow. And I'm so happy for him, man, that he's got this Super Bowl, because again, there's no other player in this league that I think gets criticized more than him. You know what I'm saying? And he shut a lot of people up on Sunday. A lot of
He
people.
really did. He really did, and I think it's a lesson to be learned. And I think there's a lot of things I wish and I hope comes from this. I don't know will. We talked about the running back position coming back into the fold.
Yep.
But I think we need to realize, man, we're just making it so quarterback driven that it just becomes a thing. And this is one thing that is not good for the NFL. It's just whoever has the better quarterback is going to win. And I don't want to speak for you, but for me growing up, that wasn't the thing. It was about
No.
the better team. A lot of times
Yeah.
about the better defense.
Yeah.
It used to be the
Yeah.
better defense is going to win, but now it just becomes better quarterback. The people were picking the Chiefs just because Mahomes better than Hurts,
Yeah.
and I'm like, but there's all these other players, just all this that makes this game, but it's just Mahomes, and we see what went down with that, Um, and when the Eagles won their last Super Bowl, we got Tom Brady. He's better than Nick Foles. That
Yeah.
was the only logic people had. I mean, Brady played great and they almost did win, but still, the better team won it. But people aren't looking at that. They're just looking at we got this quarterback, and people are forgetting. And I think GMs are too,
Yep.
where they're just going after quarterbacks who is one thing if you got them scouted that high, but it's just like, well, we need a
Yeah.
quarterback.
They're reaching. Yeah.
They're reaching on guys. And I'm just like, I don't get it. We see it now. Why are you signing Kirk Cousins, but you're going to draft Michael Penix?
Right.
Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy. And I love Michigan. Why are you drafting J.J. McCarthy as a top 10 pick? Why?
Yeah.
All he did was run. He didn't throw the football.
Right.
And then, what are you going to do? Sam Darnold. And then it was all this stuff is so quick. Sam Darnold, you got to give them the contract. They're playing great. And they were. And then they lose those games.
And he became Sam Darnold.
And then it was like, well, now play J.J. McCarthy. And it's like, well, what is it? Do you have a franchise guy or you
Right.
don't? And it's just one loss now. He's out. It's the Vikings team, which I didn't think was that great of a team. Are they
No.
that loaded? But then now it's just Sam Darnold's fault when they lose this game. Like, we're just not fair as a society with fans. And I think the scary part is the GMs are doing that too. And I think we have to really reevaluate. Quarterback's very important, but if you don't have a team around you, I don't care who you are, you're going to lose.
Yeah, it's become like college football, where it's like one week, one bad performance, and you're just the worst thing of all time. You're out of the Heisman race. It's just every week there's so much pressure on these guys to perform, and there's too many games for them and too many smart ass coaches for them to consistently just dominate. You're going to get those seasons, and you had those great quarterbacks that did that, but it's become like college football, man, to me. And it's just it's a week by week thing. And if you play well, you're the best thing. If you don't play well, then they need to get rid of you, and it's just, I don't know. It's not a fun league sometimes because of that, but that's why I think I appreciate this team, this Eagles team so much, because it's not that. It's very real old school in how they approach the game and how they dominated the game. And it just reminded me of teams like I mentioned, like the 92 Cowboys, that 91 Washington team, teams like that was just, you mentioned the 98 Broncos, teams like that it was just run the ball, great offensive line, really good defenses, and we're just going to punch you in the mouth. And they're still no remedy to that. You know what I'm saying? Like,
No.
'cause we were watching the game, and my older brother was like, he's like, they're going to make these adjustments. And I was like, look, man, there's no adjustment to be made when you can't block somebody and then they can block you really easily. Like, I don't care what adjustments you make, you're not winning if you can't do that.
Right.
And then that was the rest of the game.
No. And you look at it, your guy, Ohio State, C.J. Stroud, great rookie year.
Yeah,
He struggled this year, and maybe he's not that good. And Jaden Daniels looked amazing this year. I'm not saying he's not going to have a great year next year. I don't know, but he's going to have struggles,
right. They're going to
and
adjust, man.
they're going to be saying that now. Was that a fluke? And it's
Yeah,
like, what do you mean a fluke? Like,
it
this is the
happened. It
NFL.
actually
Yeah,
happened. Yeah,
yeah. Like C.J. Stroud killed it his rookie year. He made the playoffs both years. Texans did. Um, he won playoff games both years. It's not a fluke. He's a good quarterback.
right.
But that's what we do now. So I hope, props to Jalen Hurts, and I hope we can start to shift that. Like, it takes a team, and the league itself, everyone is doing that, where they're just making it so QB happy. That's my biggest knock as an NFL fan in today's product is that.
Yeah, no, it's making it hard for me because week of the Super Bowl, I'm usually watching every show, pregame, yeah, but like during the week, I'm watching NFL Live, whatever show it is. It's making it hard for me to watch that type of stuff because it's just the conversation about quarterback and what is he going to throw for, and it's just boring and really really boring, And this week I barely watched the week of the Super Bowl. I barely watched any TV. Now the day of, I watched a lot of stuff, but it's just
Mm-hmm.
it's you talked about GMs are getting like that. Media is obviously there already. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's all about the numbers. It's all about the fantasy football. I don't know if fantasy football did this, but
Maybe.
it's just very frustrating to watch. So I'm glad this team is not like that, and they hopefully change the culture in some of this NFL circles, man, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. So this was fun.
Yeah,
Great to
man.
recap Super Bowl 59. Let us know what you think about teams and their legacies. If you agree, disagree, if you think, who's setting themselves up, like certain people we mentioned for the Hall of Fame. If you think this loss hurts the Chiefs' legacies, we want to hear your opinion.
Yeah,
So hit us up on Twitter/X at Bigger Game Pod. Also Instagram the same at Bigger Game Pod, man. So Jose, man,
yeah.
this was fun for a lot of reasons, but obviously number one, man, there are Eagles Super Bowl champs. Congrats to them. I still can't believe it, but
Me too.
this was a fun episode, man.
Was fun, man, and it was a fun team to watch all season. And shout out to the Chiefs, man. They're on an incredible run. Again, they just went up against the juggernaut. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not used to saying that about a Philly team, so it feels good to say that. But this was fun. We went a little over than we normally do, but that's all right because this team deserved it. And yeah,
And this
no,
game did.
exactly. So great stuff, man.
So for the man, the myth, the legend, I'm Deremy Dove. Thank you guys for listening. Bigger than the game with Deremy and Jose.
Peace.